Chapter 34, Stolen Letters. Fanny safely led the three into the Slytherin common room. Most students had gone home for the Christmas holidays, so Hogwarts was nearly empty, and they hadn't encountered a single person on the way. "Wow, I always thought Slytherin's common room being in the dungeons would be kind of awful," Ron said, sinking into an armchair and patting the armrest with amazement. "But it turns out it's under the lake. Look at this chair, way fancier than anything in Gryffindor." Harry and Hermione also looked around curiously. After all, they might not get another chance to be in the Slytherin common room again. Eventually, Fanny couldn't take it anymore. She shoved Ron and Harry toward the boys' dormitory tunnel and pointed, "Hurry up. Malfoy's dorm is the fifth one down that hall. His bed's the one with the fancy pale gold curtains, the most luxurious one. He usually keeps his letters in the top drawer of his bedside table. Once you find them, come straight back out." "Got it," Harry replied as he and Ron disappeared into the boys' dormitory passage. Hermione took the chance to walk around and explore the Slytherin common room. After all, her main role in this mission had been front-loaded into the planning stage. She looked up and noticed something she'd missed earlier: the ceiling. It was made of transparent crystal. Since it was nighttime, the view above was just inky black, but it was still mesmerizing. Fanny came over and pointed out, "Noticed the ceiling? It's a clear crystal. In the summer, during the day, the view is the best of the whole year. You can see most of the lake creatures clearly. This past summer I saw mermaids and even a giant squid more than once. It's a shame it's winter now, and nighttime too, there's not much to see." As Fanny sighed, a thought suddenly struck her. She grinned like she'd remembered a hidden treasure. "Oh! Hermione, want to see the dorm I share with Anne? You'd never guess what her bed and desk look like. She seems so serious all the time, like a little grown-up." Thinking of Anne with her serious expression lecturing her, Hermione chuckled and nodded. The girls entered the corridor leading to the girls' dormitories. A simple oak door hung with a wooden plaque marked second year. When they pushed the door open, the first thing they saw was a modest fireplace, in front of which sat a rug and 3 armchairs. The fire was crackling merrily, making the whole room warm and cozy. Unlike the circular Gryffindor dormitories at the top of the tower, this room was more of a large, uneven square. Directly opposite the door stood the fireplace. To the left of the entrance were 2 beds, and 3 more were lined up on the right. Each bed was enclosed in a different colored curtain, and next to each stood a wooden desk with a tall wardrobe. On the walls above the desks, 3-tiered pine bookshelves were mounted. Hermione also noticed that the ceiling wasn't entirely stone. In the center of it was a smaller section of transparent crystal. Fanny walked over to the bed in the far left corner, only a meter or so from the fireplace, and pointed proudly. "Here it is, Anne's bed. She has the warmest spot, yet she's always the last one to get up." Hermione looked at Anne's bed, swathed in thick camel-colored velvet curtains. It looked cozy, and she couldn't help but smile. Maybe that's why she sleeps in, because it's too warm to get out of bed. But her bed doesn't look messy at all. The colors are nice, and it feels warm. Fanny smirked. "Ha, that's only because you haven't pulled back the curtains. But I won't do that now." She led Hermione over to Anne's desk. "Take a look at her desk instead, then you'll see how messy she really is. And this is just her normal state, you should see it when she's doing experiments." Only the top shelf of Anne's bookshelf held actual books. The other 2 were cluttered with variously sized glass bottles, a set of scales, wooden boxes, and a potted plant. The desk itself was piled with books, some opened and stacked on top, and an assortment of colorful potions. A wooden box lay open, revealing various metal instruments. Glass labware was scattered in the top right corner. The biggest mess, however, was paper, ordinary Muggle white paper, not parchment. Some had writing, some didn't, and many were crumpled into balls. Anne's school bag was slung over the wooden chair. Hermione stared at the chaotic desk. So this was what Anne was like in private. Surprised, aren't you? Always acting like she's got it all together, but look at this mess. Sometimes she does tidy it up, but give it 2 days and it's back to this. Then she'll complain about how annoying it is to clean. Fanny suddenly trailed off and glanced toward the door, her expression tense. Anne. Hermione's heart skipped a beat when Fanny shouted, but she quickly reminded herself, "You're Pansy. Stay calm. She won't notice anything." Still, beneath the anxiety was a strange thrill of excitement. "Are you okay?" Fanny's voice was full of concern. Hermione turned around to see Anne standing in the doorway, looking a mess. She clutched a black cloth bag in her right hand. Her hair and shoulders were dusted with snow, and her black robes were rumpled and speckled with mud. Her knees were caked in it, as if she'd fallen. A shallow gash on her left hand was dripping blood onto the floor. Hermione gasped and rushed forward. Anne hadn't expected such bad luck. First, it had started snowing, and the wet bark had made the tree branches slippery. She'd gotten scratched and then, on her way back, had run into Peeves. That damn ghost! Next time she was sending the bloody Baron to deal with him properly. Seeing Pansy and Fanny chatting in the dorm, Anne sighed in relief. She needed help, and they were just the people to ask. She held out the cloth bag to Fanny. "It's nothing serious. The snow surprised me, and then I ran into Peeves. Can you put this in my wooden chest for me?" Then, turning to Pansy, she greeted her simply, "Good evening, Pansy. Your hand." Pansy, Hermione, pointed at the gash. Fanny, now holding the bag, exclaimed, "Anne, your hand is bleeding." Anne held up her left hand to show them as she brushed past, heading toward the bathroom. "It's just a scratch from a tree branch. I'm going to shower. Fanny, after you put that away, can you grab my pajamas?" Fanny waited until Anne disappeared into the bathroom before whispering to Hermione, "Hermione, I don't think Anne ran into Harry or Ron. It's about time. You should go wait for them in the common room. Once you get the letters, just leave. I won't join you for the dramatic reading, let's meet up later and go over it in our usual spot, okay?" Hermione's eyes lingered on the bathroom door for a moment before she nodded and slipped out of the room. Fanny headed to Anne's desk, pulled a wooden chest from underneath, opened it, and carefully placed the bag inside. Then she walked over to Anne's wardrobe to fetch her pajamas. Back in the common room, Hermione checked her watch. 8:36 p.m., only 30 minutes of polyjuice potion time left. 10 more minutes passed. Still no sign of Harry or Ron. She was beginning to get anxious, pacing and glancing at the boys' dormitory tunnel. "Pansy? What are you doing, pacing like that?" It was Anne's voice. Hermione turned and saw her. Anne's left hand was now bandaged, and she wore a thick, fleece-lined white bathrobe. Her damp hair steamed slightly, and the stark contrast between her white robe and black hair made her amber eyes gleam like a lazy cat's. Anne blinked slowly at her, a little mischievously. "Phew! Good thing Malfoy's not here. He's the only boy who stayed behind for Christmas, so boring. Even just coming to the common room in pajamas, I have to be extra cautious." Anne came closer. Hermione froze and didn't respond. Anne assumed she was flustered by the mention of Malfoy, typical Pansy behavior, so she didn't press it. She just needed something off the shelf behind Pansy. As Anne stepped in, Hermione instinctively backed away. Her back hit the shelf. Anne stopped just 2 fists away, radiating heat and that clean, fresh scent from her bath. Hermione's face turned red. Anne had grown taller, but she was still shorter than the slender Pansy. Looking down, she could see her reflection in Anne's eyes. Anne took the notebook she needed and stepped back, flipping it open as she walked away toward the girls' dormitory tunnel. "Knew it was here, these are the notes I copied from that book last time." Hermione let out a long breath of relief. At that moment, footsteps echoed from the boys' dormitory. Harry and Ron appeared, Harry holding up 2 parchment envelopes. "We got them," he said excitedly. Hermione glanced toward the girls' dorm corridor, no sign of movement. She nodded at them and led the way toward the common room exit. "Let's go. Anne's back." The 3 hurried out. They sprinted all the way back to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Harry pulled the letters from his pocket, eyes gleaming. "We've got 10 minutes left before the potion wears off. Let's read them now. There are only 2, from Malfoy's dad, this week and last week." Ron's eyes didn't leave the envelopes. "Yes, let's." "Good idea." Hermione agreed. Harry handed 1 letter to Hermione. "We'll each read 1. He tore his open and scanned it quickly from top to bottom, then again more carefully. His hopeful gaze shifted to Hermione, but by then, Ron had already taken her letter and was reading it. Hermione had a bad feeling, and when she met Harry's eyes, she confirmed it. "No way!" Ron said, finishing both letters and looking stunned. "Malfoy's not the heir of Slytherin." "Then who is it?" "But his dad's just as bad as he is. He actually told him not to interfere and to let the heir of Slytherin carry on purging Muggleborns from the school." "That's disgusting." Hermione was more focused on another detail. "The letter says the chamber was opened 50 years ago and a Muggleborn student died. Maybe we can dig into school history. There might be something about the heir." Ron groaned, stuffing the letter back into its envelope. "Too bad we didn't get any dirt on Malfoy." Harry stared down at the floor, deep in thought. After a moment, he looked up. "At least we've learned something new. The chamber was opened 50 years ago. We'll find the heir eventually. Time's almost up, let's get in the stalls." A/N, amber eyes are actually pretty rare, that's why I gave them to Anne. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 35, Second Year Christmas. The night before Christmas, Fanny had been a little down all day. When Anne asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Anne just assumed she was throwing a childish tantrum. After all, kids could be hard to read sometimes. Maybe tomorrow's Christmas gift will cheer her up, Anne thought as she ate dinner. She occasionally glanced over at the Gryffindor table. The trio were eating and whispering among themselves, clearly deep in some discussion. Anne hesitated. She wasn't sure whether she should invite Hermione. She still remembered Hermione giving her cold medicine last time, and she was certain Hermione would give her a Christmas present this year. If that happened, she'd have to return the favor. She didn't like owing people. Inviting her to tomorrow morning's gathering should be harmless, right? Just Hermione. It shouldn't mean I'm getting involved in anything else, right? Anne, why do you keep sneaking looks at the Gryffindor table? Fanny asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it startled Anne. Anne nearly dropped her spoon. She quickly tightened her grip and leaned slightly toward Fanny. Fanny, do you think it'd be bad if I invited Hermione to that gathering tomorrow morning? The one I told you about. Fanny thought about it and asked, are you worried the other two will mind if you only invite her? Not really. It's not like they're my friends. I don't owe them anything. And if I invited all three, that would really entangle me with the protagonists. Things are already heading that way a little, but hanging out with just one is still better than being involved with the entire trio. Otherwise, one thing could lead to another and I'd get dragged into their adventures. No, stop overthinking. So what exactly are you planning? I still don't know what that little room next to the kitchen is for. And are you seriously going to wake up at 8? Well, it's a surprise for now, Anne said, though she felt awkward bringing it up. I just want to thank Hermione for the cold medicine she gave me. She paused. Actually, that's not the whole reason. Ah, how do I even explain this? The more she talked, the messy it got. Maybe I should just buy her another gift and save the gratitude for another time? But I already made food for 3. Fanny looked at her curiously. But aren't small favors like that normal between friends? That's just the label you all put on us. Anne thought. At best, we're... Wait, what are we, actually? Former allies due to the dragon stuff? Acquaintances? Honestly, Hermione had always been kind to her, lending transfiguration notes, helping with cold medicine. So, classmates? No, that doesn't feel right either. Friends? As soon as the thought appeared, Anne scolded herself. No. I said I wouldn't become friends with the protagonists. Definitely not. Then a voice echoed in her mind, something Fanny had once told her, Anne, no matter what you say, your actions show you treat them like friends. No, 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 everything I've done has a reason. Anne mentally defended herself. The dragon thing? Mutual benefit. The Philosopher's Stone? Fanny threatened me. Helping Ron with the slug spell? That was a spur-of-the-moment chance to test my potion skills. All reasonable. And when I helped them with their little problems, that was just me being a wise adult giving guidance, okay? Totally forgivable. But precisely because of that, she needed to distance herself from the trio even more. Tomorrow will be a turning point. I'll repay Hermione's kindness, and then if they try to involve me again, I'll just stay out of it. Eventually, they'll get too busy with their own stuff and stop noticing me. With her plan in mind, Anne glanced back at the Gryffindor table, mentally steeling herself. Right. Just a small thing. I can totally handle this. Because Anne and Fanny kept glancing at the trio while chatting, the 3 of them had definitely noticed. When Anne looked over again, they were all staring back. All 3 tensed immediately. Since the trio had seen her, Anne didn't bother hiding anymore. She asked Fanny, "You finished eating?" When Fanny nodded, Anne got up and walked directly to the Gryffindor table. Fanny quickly followed behind. As Anne got closer, the trio grew more nervous, her expression was unusually serious, as if she'd made up her mind. Anne stopped in front of them. They all froze and stared up at her. Thinking about the invitation and tomorrow's plan put Anne in a better mood, and that showed on her face. But it had been a while since she talked to Hermione, and she didn't quite know how to begin. Since all 3 were present, and her last conversation with them hadn't exactly gone well, she defaulted to a universal greeting. Hi, good evening. The trio had expected her to bring up something about Fanny. They were stunned when she said that instead. Only Ron managed to react in time, replying, Hi. Anne awkwardly rubbed her neck and turned to Hermione. I have something I wanted to ask you, Hermione. Ron and Harry exchanged a look, then quickly stood up and stepped away. You 2 go ahead and talk. Yeah, Hermione, we'll wait outside. They gave Hermione encouraging glances before hurrying off. Hermione shot them an exasperated look and turned to Anne, puzzled. Behind Anne, Fanny gave Hermione a reassuring smile. I just wanted to ask if you're free tomorrow morning. I'd like to invite you to a small gathering at 8 a.m., in the little room beside the kitchen on the dungeon floor. There's a sign on the door that says pantry. Anne said all in one breath, then exhaled in relief. Hermione's eyes lit up. Of course. I'd love to come. That's great, Hermione, Fanny chimed in behind Anne. Anne was agonizing over it for ages, too shy to ask. I told her you'd definitely want to come. I wasn't shy. Anne tried to explain, but Fanny cut her off with a grin. Then what were you hesitating about? Hermione giggled, and Fanny raised her eyebrows at the flustered Anne. The moment didn't last long, though. Hermione noticed Anne's left hand was no longer bandaged. There was a pink scar about 2 inches long on the back. She remembered how disheveled Anne had looked that day and asked, "Anne, what happened to your hand?" "Oh, this." Anne glanced at it. "Scratched by a tree branch a few days ago. Just some bad luck. It bled a bit, but Madame Pomfrey gave me some ointment. It's fine now." There weren't many people left in the hall by then, and even fewer were around when they finished talking. Anne figured it was getting late. "Oh, and remember not to eat breakfast. I'll head off now, Harry and Ron are still waiting for you. See you tomorrow." "Got it," Hermione replied. Harry and Ron were still standing by the entrance, whispering about what Anne could possibly want. When Anne and Fanny walked out, the four exchanged greetings before heading off, Anne and Fanny to their common room, and Hermione with the boys. On the way, the boys eagerly asked Hermione what Anne had said. She assured them that nothing about Fanny had been discovered and briefly mentioned Anne's invitation. The next morning, Christmas Day. Anne woke up just as dawn broke. Without waking Fanny, she quietly got dressed and left the dorm. When Fanny woke up naturally around 7:30, she was surprised to find Anne already gone. That only deepened her curiosity about the 8 a.m. meeting. After quickly getting ready, Fanny headed toward the kitchen on the dungeon level. Although the Slytherin common room was also underground, the kitchen was on the opposite side of the castle. She had to go upstairs, cross a few corridors, and then descend again. On the last hallway before reaching the kitchen, she ran into Hermione. "Good morning, Hermione," Fanny called, hurrying to catch up. "Good morning, Fanny. Where's Anne?" Hermione glanced behind her. "She was already gone when I woke up. I can't believe she managed to get up this early on such a cold morning." "Hearing that makes me look forward to this even more," Hermione said. "Same here." The tunnel to the kitchen was lit by tall white candles and felt much warmer than the chilly, drafty hallways above. When they reached a wooden door, Hermione pointed. "This must be it." Anne said there'd be a note that said pantry. The wooden door wasn't tall and had the words pantry messily scrawled across the center in thick black ink. "This doesn't exactly look like the best place for an invitation," Fanny said. Just then, a cheerful voice came from the kitchen doorway. "You're here? Perfect timing." Anne appeared, carrying a rectangular wooden tray with a porcelain soup pot on it, lid and all. "What's that?" the two girls asked in unison. Anne gave a mysterious smile. "I can't tell you yet. You'll find out soon. Go ahead and head inside." Fanny looked at the door. It didn't even have a handle. She gave Anne a look. "Ahem, yeah, the door's a bit rustic. No handle, just push it open." Hermione pushed the door. Despite its unimpressive exterior, the room inside was spacious. In the center stood a wooden table with 3 chairs, a clean patterned tablecloth, a glowing potted plant as the centerpiece, and place settings with candles. The setup was warm and charming. Anne placed her tray on the table and pulled out the other 2 chairs, bowing playfully. "Please be seated, ladies." Fanny and Hermione laughed. Hermione took a seat, glanced at the table setting, and her eyes landed on the glowing plant in the center. "What's that?" "That's a luminous branch, a plant that glows. I borrowed it," Anne replied. With a casual wave of her wand, music began to play softly from a corner of the room. The melody blended the sound of trickling streams, birdsong, and chirping insects, along with the notes of an unfamiliar instrument. Standing at the table, Anne's tone grew slightly excited. "I promise you, this breakfast is nothing like your usual ones. It's filled with unique flavors." Fanny looked at the neatly arranged silverware, then curiously pointed to the porcelain soup pot in the center of the table. "Is that what's traditionally eaten during your Christmas?" Anne shook her head. "Not just that. I've prepared more than that." She snapped her fingers and murmured a spell. Just like at the welcome feast, food suddenly appeared on the empty side of the table. "What's all this?" Fanny asked, while Hermione leaned forward, fascinated. Anne walked over to the newly laden table and opened the top layer of a stacked bamboo steamer. A cloud of fragrant steam billowed out. She placed the top basket beside the soup pot and introduced it. "These are dumplings. This variety is filled with chopped shrimp and corn." Fanny and Hermione both peered into the steamer at the 3 translucent dumplings inside. Hermione leaned in and sniffed. "It really does smell like corn." Anne giggled. "That's not all. Here's another type, beef and carrot filling." She brought over another steamer. "There's also cabbage and mushroom veggie dumplings, seafood dumplings, soup dumplings, sweet red bean buns shaped like peaches, little milk buns, custard buns, beef meatballs." By the time Anne finished listing them, the table was full of steaming bamboo baskets. Each one radiated warmth, and the savory aromas had a strong effect on the 2 girls who hadn't had breakfast yet. Fanny swallowed a bit of drool and looked up hopefully. "Can we start eating?" Hermione looked at Anne too. Anne returned to her seat and smiled. "Of course. Help yourselves." Fanny picked up her fork and knife but soon found herself stumped. She glanced around the table and said to Anne, "Everything looks amazing, but using a fork or spoon doesn't feel right." At the other end of the table, Hermione nodded in agreement. Anne, who had just picked up a dumpling with her chopsticks, smoothly turned her hand and transferred it to Fanny's plate. "Then I'll serve you. That's part of the tradition too." Turning to Hermione, she asked, "Which one would you like to try?" Hermione looked over the various baskets, each one tempting with its delicious smell. She hesitated. "They all look so good. I'll start with this one." Anne placed a soup dumpling on Hermione's plate and warned her gently, "This one's pretty hot. Blow on it first." After finishing a shrimp dumpling, Fanny smiled in satisfaction. "That was really good. Anne, I want to try that green one. Why is it green?" Anne deftly picked one up and served it to her. "The dumpling skin has tea leaves mixed into it." She then handed one to Hermione as well. After a while of Anne serving dish after dish, both Hermione and Fanny began to feel guilty that Anne hadn't eaten much herself. So they asked her to teach them how to use chopsticks. Anne was more than happy to oblige, teaching them by hand. Hermione learned quickly, while Fanny eventually gave up and settled for using a spoon. As they ate and chatted, the steamers gradually emptied. At last, Anne uncovered the soup pot. Inside were about 20 small, perfectly round white dumplings floating in a clear broth. "These are the final dishes of today's breakfast. It's a traditional dessert eaten at the end of a Christmas feast. Normally the filling is sesame, but I used a different fruit-based blend that I think you'll really like." She smiled mischievously at Fanny. "You can use a spoon for these, Fanny." Hermione giggled. Fanny pouted, pretending to be aggrieved. Anne took their bowls and served a few tang yuan into each one. Hermione didn't eat right away. She stirred the round dumplings gently with her spoon. "They're so soft and pretty," Anne explained as she watched them play with the dumplings. "The white outer layer is made of glutinous rice, it's soft and chewy. But it's really hot, so be careful." She blew on one with her spoon, then popped it into her mouth. It slid in easily, smooth and fragrant. The soft glutinous rice gave way to a delicate burst of fruity sweetness. The filling was like a soft fruit gel, bursting with a fragrant, juicy flavor that quickly spread through her mouth. It was a perfectly balanced blend, sweet but not cloying, without any of the tart or bitter aftertaste that some fruits have. After a few bites, the fruit center took on a creamy, chocolate-like texture that seemed to wrap around the chewy rice layer from the inside. The combination was heavenly. And best of all, unlike the tang yuan from her past life, this one didn't feel like it would get stuck in her throat, it slid down smoothly, leaving a lingering sweetness behind. Anne closed her eyes and smiled in contentment. This batch was perfect. Fanny and Hermione followed her lead and each popped one into their mouths. Their eyes lit up instantly, they were clearly loving it. Anne finished her bowl first, set her spoon down with a satisfied sigh, and leaned back in her chair. Fanny and Hermione followed shortly after. That was amazing. The tang yuan were delicious, and everything before them too, but the tang yuan were the best. Fanny said, wiping her mouth with a napkin. Hermione nodded eagerly. I agree, Anne. I'm so glad you liked it, Anne said. Now that breakfast is nearly over, I have a little Christmas gift for each of you. She walked over to a dark corner of the room, where no candles had been placed. When she returned to the candlelight, she was carrying 2 potted plants. She handed one to each of them. Hermione took hers and looked closely. The plant had small, delicate green leaves. What kind of plant is this? I'll tell you in a moment, Anne said. But first, try touching one of the leaves. Still puzzled, Hermione reached out and gently brushed the leaf. The tiny fronds instantly folded in on themselves. Wow! It moved on its own. Fanny exclaimed. Is this a magical plant? Anne shook her head. Nope. It's called a mimosa, or sensitive plant. The name means it gets shy when touched. It's a tropical plant, so you probably haven't seen one before since the UK has a temperate climate. But I thought you'd both like it, so I raised 2 and saved them as Christmas gifts. Fanny eagerly touched her plant again and again, eyes shining. I love it. Hermione looked up, delighted. Anne, since it's not magical, does that mean I can take it home and grow it? Absolutely. You can even travel with it, if you want. Just remember, it likes warmth and humidity. With the weather this cold, you'll probably need to keep it near the fireplace. Hermione nodded thoughtfully. Maybe I'll look up some books in the library about how to take better care of it. Anne smiled and added, you might want to take a closer look at the flower pot. Fanny and Hermione lifted their pots again. The plain terracotta surface didn't have any decorations at first glance, but etched faintly into the clay were words. My name is Mimosa pudica. I was born long ago in the Americas. I like warm, humid places. Taking care of me isn't easy. I need water once a day and prefer temperatures above 10 degrees Celsius. I get shy when touched, but I've got character. Don't try to eat me, because I'm poisonous. I sleep at night and will fold my leaves. Oh, and though I'm just a plant, I can bloom. What color? That depends on how well you treat me. Wow! Anne, how did you even come up with this idea? It's brilliant. Fanny held the pot in both hands like it was a treasure. Hermione looked just as happy. She turned the pot over, rereading the message several times. Anne walked to the door and opened it with a grin. Ladies, I must pause your compliments here. If you stay any longer, you'll miss the rest of this beautiful Christmas morning. I only borrowed this room for the morning, after all. Fanny and Hermione exchanged a look, then laughed and stepped out together. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 36, Christmas and Valentine's Day. After a joyful Christmas morning, Anne and Fanny returned to the Slytherin dormitory. With the favor she owed Hermione now repaid, Anne felt a great weight lifted off her shoulders, and so she was in an especially good mood while unwrapping her presents. She didn't even notice there seemed to be more gifts than expected, until she opened one package and let out a startled gasp. Fanny leaned over to peek. A book? That's a nice Christmas present. Anne, why are you so surprised? Anne handed her the card that came with it, her voice filled with disbelief. It's from Harry Potter. Fanny took the card. It read, Merry Christmas, Anne. Harry Potter. She frowned slightly. Yeah? So? He sent you a gift. What about it? But I didn't give him one," Anne said, then grabbed another package from the pile, this one wrapped in parchment and labeled, Ron Weasley. She held it up, even more shocked. "Ron Weasley sent one too? But I didn't get him anything either." Fanny frowned and scolded, "Anne, that's not right. You should have thought about giving them something. It's basic etiquette. Think how disappointed they must have been this morning when they didn't get anything from you. And you know the Weasleys' situation, Ron still sent you a gift." How was I supposed to know they'd get me something? What do I do now?" She thought about pretending not to have seen the gifts, but Fanny had a point. Even Ron had sent her something. Anne didn't plan to tag along with the trio on their adventures, but she definitely didn't want to offend them. They were the main characters, after all. "If I go now to return the favor, do you think it's still okay?" Anne looked at Fanny, asking anxiously. "I think the sooner you fix this, the better," Fanny said seriously. "And don't give them something half-hearted either, Anne, or I'll give you an earful." "Fine." Anne sighed, then hurried to her desk, scanning it for ideas. When her eyes landed on a glass display case, a light bulb went off. "I've got it." Fanny stood beside her like a watchdog, making sure Anne wouldn't slack off with the gifts. Anne opened her wardrobe, pulling out a small leather trunk filled with Quidditch merchandise, all from Erin's packages. She dug out the latest edition of the Irish national team collectible figures, all moving around inside a glass-fronted box, some flying on broomsticks. "This can go to Ron. He'll definitely love it," Anne said, placing the box on the desk. Fanny lifted it carefully and nodded. "It's perfect. But honestly, I think Harry would like it even more. He's the Gryffindor Seeker, isn't he?" Anne pulled out two signed team photos, one of the Irish team and the other of the Bulgarian team, then shut the trunk and stood up. "I think Harry might need something else more, for what he's going to face later." She handed Fanny the Irish photo. "Fanny, could you wrap Ron's gift for me? There's blank parchment over there." "All right, but what exactly are you giving Harry?" Fanny asked, already placing the photo on the box and pulling out a large sheet of parchment. Anne put the trunk back into the wardrobe, then crouched down to pull a larger wooden chest from beneath the desk. It was filled with all sorts of pouches and colorful little boxes. After scanning them, she took a small black box from the lower left corner. It was palm-sized, with the word danger scribbled in bright white ink on the lid. "This one will do. The other items are too harmless," Anne murmured, holding the box but hesitating slightly. Fanny paused in her wrapping and crouched beside Anne, eyeing the box curiously. "What's that?" "It says danger on it." Anne made up her mind. She shut the chest and shoved it back under the desk. "It's better if I don't tell you. You'll never need it." Fanny stood up with her and gave the box a curious stare. "All right." Then she went back to wrapping Ron's present. Anne grabbed another piece of parchment and wrapped the black box. When both were wrapped, Anne wrote Christmas greetings on each. By lunchtime, Anne arrived at the Great Hall carrying the presents. Luckily, the only ones there were the trio, just as she'd hoped. No crowd, no audience. Perfect. She walked straight toward them. Harry and Ron had already finished their food, while Hermione was barely touching hers. She explained to the boys that she'd eaten too much in the morning. As Anne approached, Harry and Ron instinctively began to stand, assuming she was here for Hermione again. "Good afternoon," Anne said coolly, stopping them. "Harry, Ron, wait, I'm here to see you too." Fanny also greeted them cheerfully. Hermione raised an eyebrow at Anne's words, clearly curious what this was about. Anne took a seat beside Hermione and slid the gifts across the table to Ron and Harry, who stared at her in confusion. "I forgot to give you your Christmas presents this morning because of some things I had to do," Anne admitted, a bit embarrassed. "So here they are now." Ron's face lit up as he picked up the small box wrapped in parchment. Is this for me? Anne nodded. Of course. Go ahead and open it. Harry took his own package, a small, black wooden box, and examined it, flipping it over in his hands. Then he glanced at Ron's gift. Can I open mine too? Anne gave a small nod, and they both began unwrapping. Oh Merlin, this is the newest Irish national team figure set. An assigned photo. Anne, this is amazing. Fred and George are going to be so jealous. Ron hugged the box like it was made of gold. Harry glanced enviously at Ron's box, then looked at his own, with danger written boldly across it. Others at the table began to notice his odd gift as well. Ahem. Anne cleared her throat, clearly flustered by the growing attention. Harry, I put a lot of thought into that one too. It's very useful. Just open it. The box wasn't latched, it slid open. Inside were 3 twig-like sticks, with a white string attached to one of them. Anne carefully lifted one. See that white string? It works kind of like a firework fuse. If you ever find yourself in danger, pull the string and throw it toward the threat. But never at a person. Everyone stared at her like she'd grown another head. Anne's ears turned pink. I just think your trio tends to attract trouble. Ugh, forget it. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a signed photo of the entire Bulgarian national team. Here. This is for you, Harry. My uncle says Ireland and Bulgaria are going to face off in the World Cup finals next year. People will be envious when they see this. Harry looked a bit ashamed. He'd been a little disappointed with his gift at first, especially compared to Ron's, but now he realized it might actually be something special. Thanks, Anne. I think this is a really great gift, Harry said. Yet. Ron added quickly. We definitely might need that thing, you know, being the trio and all. Then take it. Anne waved a hand, standing up and rubbing her stomach. Anyway, I'm off to lunch now. She muttered as she turned away, hope all this food helps me grow taller. Hermione and Fanny both heard her. Hermione stifled a laugh, Fanny didn't even try. The Christmas holidays flew by. Soon, Hogwarts was bustling again. Students had already moved on to new gossip, and the Chamber of Secrets seemed almost forgotten, especially since no new attacks had occurred over the break. Lockhart, of course, wasted no time taking credit for the calm. Anne and Fanny once overheard him talking to Professor Flitwick in the corridor. I dare say the danger's past, Professor Flitwick. I suspect the culprit knows I'll catch them next time. I've gathered quite the collection of clues. Oh, you're asking who it is? Well, I can't say for sure yet. Wouldn't want to accuse an innocent man. Anne rolled her eyes at Lockhart's fakery, though Fanny wasn't so sure. Maybe he's telling the truth? He has done lots of heroic things. Didn't he say he once caught a banshee, she said, after Anne mocked him. Anne didn't bother arguing with a girl clearly dazzled by Lockhart's looks. Days passed quickly, and soon it was February 14th. Since it was a Friday, Anne hadn't slept in. She and Fanny chatted as they walked from the common room to the great hall. But when they entered, Anne thought for a moment she'd stepped into the wrong room. The walls were covered in giant, glaring pink flowers. Worse, colorful heart-shaped confetti rained from the pale blue ceiling. Anne and Fanny headed for the Slytherin table. Malfoy sat there looking utterly disgusted. Pansy, on the other hand, seemed in a great mood as she happily cut into a piece of meat. What happened here? Anne asked as she sat down, brushing confetti off her roast. Pansy pointed toward the staff table. Professor Lockhart. He said he wanted to lift everyone's spirits and help us forget last term, so he organized today's event. Wonderful. Fanny said, pouring herself a cup of milk tea. Anne glanced over the food, carefully selecting anything untouched by confetti. Yeah, I don't think so. Happy Valentine's Day! Lockhart shouted. So far, I've received 46 cards, thank you, thank you. And yes, I took the liberty of organizing a little surprise for you all. But wait, there's more. He clapped, and from the entrance strode 12 surly-looking dwarves, each with golden wings and a harp strapped to their backs. My friendly, card-carrying cupids. Lockhart beamed. They'll be roaming the school all day delivering your Valentine's messages. And that's not all. I'm sure my colleagues are eager to join the fun. Why not have Professor Snape teach you to brew a love potion? Or perhaps Professor Flitwick could charm someone with a spell more effective than any I've seen. Professor Flitwick buried his face in his hands. As for Snape, his expression made it clear that anyone asking him about love potions would be lucky to escape without being force-fed poison. Anne had a sarcastic retort ready, but one look at the starry-eyed Fanny and Pansy stopped her. Better not become the enemy of every girl in the castle. During potions class that morning, dwarves barged in repeatedly to deliver Valentine cards. Each time someone received one, Snape's face darkened, and he'd always follow it with a question. Fanny got 5 questions. Anne got 4. Harry received 2 cards and was asked 4 questions total. After class, Fanny let out a relieved sigh. That was the first time I've ever been scared to receive a Valentine's card. Still, she eagerly flipped through her collection. Anne glanced at hers, then shoved them all at Fanny. Here, you take them. Fanny eagerly accepted. Ooh, let me see what people wrote to Anne. A/N, writing this suddenly made me think, how many invitations will Anne get when the Goblet of Fire year comes? She's quite a looker, after all. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 37, Conflict. The day after Valentine's Day, Anne and Fanny parted ways at the entrance of the Great Hall after dinner. Fanny took a few steps in the direction of the Slytherin common room, but once Anne's figure disappeared from view, she quickly turned and headed for the 3rd floor. Moaning Myrtle wasn't in her bathroom, but the trio was. What's going on? Did you find something new? Fanny asked. Ron and Hermione both looked at Harry, who began to explain. You already know we found Tom Riddle's diary here. That night, the 4 of us tried all sorts of things with it. Afterward, I just kept it in my bag. But yesterday, during the whole Valentine's Day dwarf incident, my bag got torn, and ink spilled all over the diary. That's when I discovered its secret. It belonged to someone who studied at Hogwarts 50 years ago. He knew about the monster in the Chamber of Secrets, and he claims the person who released it was Hagrid. He finished, looking downcast. Hermione and Ron wore equally troubled expressions. You mean your big friend, Hagrid? The one who raised a dragon? Fanny asked. Yeah. Harry nodded, clearly distraught. There was nothing worse than discovering a friend might be the villain. Fanny thought for a moment. Can I see the diary? Harry handed it to her. Fanny flipped through the pages, but just like before, it was blank. Can you walk me through how you found out all of this? She asked. Harry then described everything he had seen and heard from the diary. When he finished, Fanny said, Riddle might have gotten it wrong. Maybe it was some other creature that hurt people. You sound like Hermione, Ron said gloomily. But how many monsters do you think Hogwarts can hide? Besides, we know Hagrid got expelled because of this. Riddle even received a special award for services to the school after reporting him. No one spoke for a while. Clearly, none of them wanted to accept that this could be the truth. Finally, Hermione hesitantly asked, should we try asking Hagrid directly about all this? Oh, that'll be a fun visit, Ron said sarcastically. Hi, Hagrid. Mind telling us if you've recently let some giant hairy beast loose in the castle again? Fanny handed the diary back to Harry. I think you'd better not. Look, it's been a long time since the last attack. Maybe your friend Hagrid already has the creature under control, she said. And besides, the petrified victims will be cured soon with the mandrakes. The trio nodded. As much as they wanted answers, confronting a friend about an expulsion wasn't exactly a pleasant idea. It had been 4 months since Justin and nearly headless Nick were petrified, and most students now believed that the attacker, whoever it was, had finally stopped. Over the Easter holidays, second-year students had something new to worry about, selecting electives for their third year. Fanny had been agonizing over it ever since she first heard. Anne had received a letter from Aaron, which included a list of electives her parents had chosen when they were students, along with suggestions from various friends of his. She only schemed 2 entries before putting the letter aside, otherwise she'd be stuck reading it all afternoon. These decisions will affect our future, Fanny told Anne seriously. I think your Uncle Aaron did a great job with his research. You should really take a closer look at what he wrote. Anne, however, was staring at the new course list. She scrawled a large X next to Transfiguration. I want to drop Transfiguration. No way! Fanny exclaimed. That's a core subject, Anne. You can't drop a core subject. Sigh. Anne dropped her quill and propped her chin up with one hand. Fine. Then I'll pick these 4, arithmancy, divination, care of magical creatures, and ancient runes. Why are you picking 2 divination classes? Fanny asked. Propping her chin with one hand, Anne wrote her name next to the subjects. So I can drop one if I don't like it next term. It was a bright and sunny day, with a pleasant breeze drifting across the Hogwarts grounds, perfect for Quidditch. The match today, Gryffindor vs Hufflepuff. As always, Fanny dragged Anne to the stadium. By the time it was nearly 11, the place was buzzing with excitement. Just as Madame Hooch was about to release the balls, Professor McGonagall suddenly rushed onto the field, holding a massive microphone. The match is cancelled, she announced. A chorus of groans and protests erupted from the stands, but McGonagall paid no mind. She continued coldly, all students must return to their common rooms immediately. Your heads of house will give you further instructions there. Please make your way out promptly. The crowds grumbled their way down from the stands. Fanny tugged on Anne's sleeve, worried. Anne, what do you think happened? Anne walked along with the crowd, muttering under her breath, someone's probably been petrified again. And if her guess was right, it was Hermione. The thought sent an odd discomfort through her chest. All students must return to their common rooms by 6 o'clock. No one is allowed to leave the dormitories after this time. Students will be escorted to and from each class by a teacher. No one may use the bathrooms without a teacher's presence. All Quidditch practices and matches are postponed. All evening activities are suspended. The Slytherin students gathered in the common room, listening in silence as Professor Snape delivered the announcement in his usual cold, monotone voice. When he finished reading the notice, he cast a chilling glance around the room and added, "And I don't want to find any of you wandering around after hours. Especially not in places you don't belong." As soon as Snape left, the common room exploded in noise. Malfoy climbed onto an armchair, waving his arms triumphantly. That filthy mudblood finally got petrified. Haha! Who wants to guess who's next? Fanny surged forward angrily, but Anne grabbed her and dragged her back to the dormitory. Once inside, Fanny yanked her arm free. Anne, what are you doing? I wanted to tell Malfoy off properly. You confronting him would only make him more smug and unbearable. Don't waste your breath, Fanny. I think we should trust the professors to find the culprit. Anne tried to comfort her, though her own heart felt heavy. She knew this was going to happen, the main characters would figure it out in the end. So why did it feel so awful? Fanny shuddered slightly at the word culprit. She didn't respond, but one thought circled in her mind, Ron and Harry need to talk to their big friend Hagrid. They definitely will. The next day, the students were hit with another shock. Professor Dumbledore had been removed from his position by the school board. Aside from Malfoy, no one was happy about it. In fact, he was even more smug than usual, bragging loudly, "My father's one of the board members, you know. He's the one who pushed for it." Fanny was furious. "My dad's on the board too. Why would he agree to something like this? No, I need to ask him myself, this isn't right." Anne made no comment. She knew Dumbledore would return. But now, even though she couldn't sneak away to the greenhouse, the school had banned all solo outings. So instead, she headed to the library whenever she had free time, searching for books about basilisks. For some reason, reading about the monster made her feel more at ease. Still, each time she opened a book, she told herself firmly, "It's just curiosity. I'm not going to get involved." But Dumbledore was gone, and fear crept through Hogwarts like never before. The warm spring sun outside the castle walls couldn't penetrate the windows. Every face was anxious. Even laughter in the hallways felt strange, too loud, too forced, and was quickly stifled. One afternoon in the library, Anne passed by the herbology shelves and happened to spot Fanny chatting with a Gryffindor girl. From her angle, she could only see the side of the girl's face. It looked familiar. On her way back with a stack of books, Anne finally remembered who it was: Ginny Weasley. Ron's sister. Harry's future wife. And the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets. But when Anne returned to the herbology section, the two girls were gone. Down in the first floor reading area, Fanny was flipping through a history book. Anne hurried over and sat beside her, speaking in a quick whisper. "Fanny, was that Ginny Weasley you were talking to? What were you two discussing? She didn't say anything strange, did she? I need to tell you something." Fanny cut her off, her expression dark. "Let me guess. You're going to warn me not to talk to her." Anne froze, then nodded slowly. "She might be in a little bit of danger." "Danger? That word again." Fanny's voice rose slightly, anger bubbling to the surface. "I don't understand what kind of danger a first-year girl could pose. I don't understand how you can stay so calm after your friend was attacked. And I really don't understand how you can act so indifferent when Malfoy insults Hermione or when Dumbledore gets removed. You say they're the Golden Trio or whatever, but from where I'm standing, they do what they do not just for themselves." Her words came faster and faster, and by the end, she shot to her feet. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, drawing stares from the other students. Anne sat frozen. Fanny's reaction had completely blindsided her. Fanny hastily gathered her books, then turned back toward Anne, speaking with furious speed. "The dangerous person you're warning me about? She just wanted to ask me how to take care of Hermione's Mimosa Pudica. Because your friend is petrified and no one's there to water it." Ginny knew how much Hermione loved that plant, but she was too scared to ask you. So she came to me, since I have the other one. Anne watched Fanny storm out of the library, her face still flushed with anger. She didn't say a word. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 38, The Chamber of Secrets, Part 1. For the next few days, Fanny didn't say a single word to Anne. Whether in class or at meals, she made sure to sit on the opposite side of Pansy. Several times, Anne tried to approach and explain or apologize, but Fanny would either walk away or ignore her. God, how was she supposed to explain anything to a stubborn, angry kid? And the worst part, Anne couldn't even explain herself clearly. She couldn't just say, "I know the plot. Ginny is the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets. Stay away from her." She couldn't say, "The main trio has plot armor. Nothing will happen to them. Dumbledore will be back soon." And what would she even apologize for? That she wouldn't call Ginny dangerous anymore? In the end, Anne realized Fanny's accusations had all been true, based solely on Anne's actions. She had no excuse. It felt like she was trapped in a deadlock, one that couldn't be easily undone. Thankfully, during Transfiguration class, Professor McGonagall announced that final exams would proceed as scheduled. Anne seized the opportunity. Every chance she got, she gave Fanny pitiful looks, partly to ease the tension, and partly because Anne really did need help with the Transfiguration final. The only other top student who could help was still lying petrified in the hospital wing. That evening in the Slytherin dormitory, Anne clutched her Transfiguration notes and stood beside Fanny, who was doing her homework. She didn't speak, just kept looking at her with a pitiful expression. At first, Fanny ignored her. But after half an hour, she sighed and put down her quill. Anne had been doing this for days, and to be fair, she really did look pitiful, at least in Transfiguration. Fanny softened a little, though she wasn't ready to forgive her. She turned to Anne and, in a cool and businesslike tone, said, "Give me your notes. I'll help you review." Anne instantly smiled and handed the notes over with both hands. In her heart, she made a V sign. It was a start. But she knew the misunderstanding wasn't resolved yet. So she stuck to her self-imposed rule, don't say anything except what's needed for Transfiguration. 3 days before the first exam, Professor McGonagall made another announcement at breakfast. "I have good news for you all," she said. Instead of quieting down, the Great Hall burst into noise. "Dumbledore's coming back," someone shouted. "You caught the heir of Slytherin," a Ravenclaw girl shrieked. "Quidditch is back!" Oliver Wood hollered. Once the clamor died down, Professor McGonagall continued, "Professor Sprout has informed me that the mandrakes are finally ready for harvesting. Tonight, we'll be able to revive those who have been petrified. I must point out that one of them might be able to tell us who or what attacked them. I sincerely hope this dreadful year ends with the culprit in custody." Cheers erupted. Anne noticed that, for the first time in days, Fanny smiled. Anne made a mental note to talk to her more over the summer and hoped this incident would soon pass. By the time Anne finished eating, Fanny had already left. It had been like this lately, and Anne didn't complain. She wiped her mouth and was about to leave when Professor Snape appeared. "Reeve," he said in his usual low and unchanging tone. "The mandrakes are ready. Professor Sprout wants you to assist. Be back before curfew." "Yes, Professor. I'll go right away." In the greenhouse, wearing earmuffs, Anne helped Professor Sprout and a senior Hufflepuff extract juice from the mandrakes. Professor Sprout was in high spirits. Before Anne left, she said warmly, "Anne, I know you have a friend who was petrified. Don't worry, they'll be fine tonight." Anne felt truly happy. Not just the joy of working with high-level magical plants, but something else. Hermione would wake up tonight. She told herself it was just because she missed Hermione's Transfiguration notes. After the extraction, Anne's robes were covered in dirt. Since it wasn't yet dinner time, she headed straight to the Slytherin dormitory to take a shower first. But as soon as she entered, she knew something was wrong. Only 3 girls were there. Fanny was missing. The rest were silently packing their trunks. A bad feeling spread through Anne. "Pansy," she asked, walking over. "What's going on? Why are you all packing?" Pansy glanced at her, her hands never stopping. Her voice lacked its usual arrogant flair and was instead tinged with sadness. Professor McGonagall told everyone to return to their dorms. Then Snape came and said we're all going home tomorrow. Someone was attacked again, and taken by the monster. He also said. Her voice faltered. He said Hogwarts might be closed. Anne latched onto a single word. Her voice rose in panic. "Pansy, did you say they were taken? Who do you mean?" She glanced around. And where's Fanny? Snape said the monster took Gryffindor's Ginny Weasley and Fanny. Damn it! Anne swore under her breath. The image of the library flashed in her mind. Fanny must have been talking to Ginny about the Mimosa Pudica when she got caught by Tom Riddle in the diary. What now? Harry and Ron would definitely go to save Ginny, Anne knew that much. Ginny would be fine. But Fanny? Fanny didn't know them well. Would she be okay? Anne couldn't be sure. If she gets hurt, it's your fault. A voice screamed in her head. You gave her the plant. That's why Ginny came to find her. A storm of thoughts raged in Anne's mind. In the end, she made up her mind, she had to go into the Chamber of Secrets. If something happened to Fanny, Anne would never forgive herself. But first, she needed to prepare. And find the main characters. She dashed to her desk, opened a chest underneath, and quickly grabbed a cloth pouch and a small box. She stuffed them into her robe pockets and ran out, ignoring Pansy's questions. Where would the trio be? Anne thought as she ran. In the story, Harry, Ron, and Lockhart went to the girls' bathroom to enter the chamber. The fastest way was to check Lockhart's office first. Outside the office, Anne arrived just in time to see Harry and Ron pointing their wands at Professor Lockhart. Miss Reeve! Lockhart exclaimed with forced cheer. Thank heavens, I was just telling the boys. Anne drew her wand and pointed it at him. Don't talk. She turned to Harry. You know where the chamber is? He nodded quickly. Hermione solved it. It's a basilisk. We think the entrance is in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Is Fanny really taken? Anne interrupted. Ron replied, nearly in tears. The basilisk took Ginny and Fanny both. Then let's go. No time to explain. Anne joined their group. At the bathroom, after a few words with Myrtle, Anne found the snake symbol on a tap. Here it is. Harry, speak Parseltongue. Open, Harry said, in English. Ron shook his head. Nope. That's not Parseltongue. Think of it like you're talking to a real snake, Anne advised. Harry took a breath. This time, a strange hissing sound came from his mouth. The tap glowed, spun rapidly, and the sink sank away to reveal a wide pipe. Ron gasped. Harry peered into the darkness and said firmly, I'm going in. Me too, Ron said. Wait, Anne said, pointing her wand at Lockhart. Surely the powerful professor should go first. Lockhart turned pale. Kids, really, what's the point? Maybe they're all ready. He didn't finish. Ron jabbed him in the back. Anne's right. You go first. Lockhart hesitated, then slowly lowered himself in, clinging to the edge. Listen, kids. Harry pried his hands off and Ron gave him a shove. Down he went. Nice one, Anne said, giving them a thumbs up. Let's go too, Harry said, then slid down. After Ron followed, Anne tucked her wand into her robe, patted her pocket to check the 2 items, took a deep breath, and muttered in Chinese, Heaven help us. The slide was long, wet, and twisting. Pipes branched out in all directions, but none as wide as the one they traveled through. It curved sharply and dropped steeply. They were deep underground now, even deeper than the Slytherin dormitory. Anne couldn't help but think, Hogwarts has a great sewer system. No wonder it never floods. Then she hit the ground. The pipe leveled out, and she slid out onto a damp stone floor. It was a huge, dark tunnel, tall enough to stand in. Nearby, Lockhart stood dripping with muck, pale as ever. Harry and Ron stood with wands drawn. Anne got up and looked down at her robes. Muddy before, they were now drenched in foul-smelling sewage. Adventuring is clearly a boy's job, she thought. We must be miles under the school, Harry said. His voice echoed. Maybe even beneath the lake, Ron added. Lumos, Anne said, lighting her wand. She stared into the dark. Let's find them. Their footsteps echoed wetly. The tunnel was too dark to see far. Their shadows danced like monsters on the glistening walls. Remember, Harry whispered, the monster is a basilisk. One look into its eyes and you die. If we hear anything, shut your eyes. But the tunnel was deathly silent. Then, crack! Ron had stepped on a rat skull. Anne lowered her wand. There are bones everywhere, she said, glancing at the floor. Ron and Lockhart gulped audibly. They said nothing more and continued walking, turning into a dark bend. Harry, what is that? Ron croaked, grabbing his shoulder. Ahead lay the outline of something enormous, coiled and unmoving, a massive serpent, lying in wait. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 39, The Chamber of Secrets, Part 2. Maybe it's asleep, Harry said breathlessly. Anne's heart was racing, but she didn't believe they'd encounter the basilisk so soon. She glanced back. Lockhart was covering his eyes tightly, and Ron's hand holding his wand was trembling. You three stay here, I'll go take a look, Harry said as he began to move forward. Anne hesitated, then grabbed Harry's arm. Wait. She pulled a cloth pouch from her pocket and took out a glowing plant orb. With a quick motion, she activated the orb. It began to emit a soft yellow light, growing steadily brighter. She used a levitation charm to guide it toward the massive creature up ahead. It's bioluminescent. No heat, so the snake won't notice it, she explained in a low voice. Harry and Ron looked at her with admiration, immensely glad Anne had joined their quest. Unfortunately, I only have one, Anne added, guiding the orb forward. Then, as if remembering something, she leaned toward Harry and whispered, Harry, do you have the Christmas gift I gave you? I do. Oh, Anne, you have no idea how amazing it is. Last time in the Forbidden Forest, it really... Okay, Anne cut him off. Good. If we see the basilisk, pull the white thread and throw it at it. The glowing orb reached the massive creature. Under the yellow light, they saw a shed snakeskin, gleaming green and vibrant, unmistakably from a venomous snake. It lay coiled on the tunnel floor, empty. The creature that had shed it was clearly over 20 feet long. Anne and Harry exchanged relieved glances and walked toward it. Behind them, Ron gave a helpless sigh. Blimey! Another noise, a groan from Lockhart. His knees gave out, and he collapsed. Harry turned to look at him, disgust evident in his expression. Ron, get him up. Ron nodded. He pointed his wand at Lockhart and said firmly, get up. Lockhart stood, and lunged at Ron, knocking him to the ground. Harry froze, stunned, then started to move, but it was too late. Lockhart rose, panting, holding Ron's wand in one hand, flashing his signature smile and dazzling teeth. Well, children, this adventure ends now, he announced breathlessly. I'll take this skin back to the school, tell them I was too late to save the girls, and that you two lost your minds upon seeing their mangled bodies. Say goodbye to your memories. Anne had raised her wand by his second sentence, but she was too slow. Useless though he might be, Lockhart was still faster than a student when casting spells. He raised Ron's malfunctioning wand high. Obliviate! Boom! The wand exploded like a small bomb. Anne and Harry covered their heads and staggered back, narrowly avoiding falling debris from the tunnel ceiling. When they uncovered their heads, a thick wall of rubble stood before them. Ron! Are you all right? Ron! Harry shouted. I'm here. Ron's muffled voice came through. I'm fine. But this idiot isn't, he got hit by the wand. There was a dull thud and a loud yell. Ow! It sounded like Ron had kicked Lockhart's shin. What now? Ron said despairingly. We can't get through. It'll take ages to clear this. Anne glanced at the wall of rubble, then at her watch, then turned to Harry. She silently prayed that his main character's aura was strong enough to take down the basilisk on his own. We've already wasted too much time. We have to go, she said. Harry nodded. Ron, we're going ahead. See you soon. They walked around the snakeskin, Ron's sounds of shifting stones fading behind them. The tunnel twisted again and again. Anne clutched her wand tightly in her right hand, and in her left, she held a small glass vial she had taken from her box. Harry had his wand in one hand and in the other, a broken twig-like item with a white thread, Anne's Christmas gift. Finally, they reached a solid stone wall carved with two intertwined serpents. Their emerald eyes gleamed. Anne looked at Harry. He nodded and hissed in Parseltongue. The serpents parted. The wall split open and slid aside. Lumos, Anne whispered, lighting a short stretch of the stone path ahead. They stepped into the chamber. They found themselves on one side of a long, dimly lit room. Towering stone columns, carved with coiling serpents, rose to a ceiling lost in darkness. Eerie green mist swirled through the air, casting long, sinister shadows. They walked quietly past the pillars. At the far end of the chamber stood a colossal statue, pressed against the dark wall. It was a massive face, ancient and monkey-like, with a long, sparse beard trailing down to the hem of a stone wizard's robe. Two large, dusty feet rested on the floor. Between them lay two small, motionless figures in black robes, Fanny and Ginny. Ginny. Fanny. Harry ran forward and knelt, shaking Ginny. Wake up! His wand and twig rolled away. Anne, eyes scanning cautiously, moved toward them. When she saw Harry's wand on the ground, she swore. Fuck! At that moment, a shadowy figure appeared near the Ephraim wand. She won't wake. Anne immediately raised her wand. Expelliarmus, she shouted. A white flash shot out, right through the figure. Tisk tisk tisk. She now saw him clearly, a tall boy with black hair, no older than 16, leaning against a stone pillar, watching her. His form was hazy, almost transparent. He bent to pick up Harry's wand. Anne froze. A ghost? Her spell had no effect. She'd only prepared for a basilisk, not a ghost with a wand and two hostages. Then Harry opened his mouth and made everything worse. Tom? Tom Riddle? Are you a ghost? A memory, Riddle said calmly. Preserved in a diary for 50 years. He pointed to a tattered book lying near the statue's foot. Anne's eyes locked onto it. A Horcrux? She had to destroy it, but not yet. He still had the upper hand. Riddle and Harry began to talk. Anne's eyes drifted toward the Ephraim twig. Maybe she could retrieve it, it was powerful. She took a step. They kept talking. Another step. Still talking. A bigger step, she was nearly there. Don't move. Riddle pointed Harry's wand at her. Anne froze, matching his stance with her own wand. Really now, Riddle chuckled. You're just a second-year student. What could you possibly do? Oh. Anne smiled back, steady despite her racing heart. And you? You're just a memory. I doubt you can actually use that wand, Voldemort. Riddle flinched at the name. Anne used the moment to take one last step. She could grab the twig with a single bend. Harry was still reeling from learning Ginny had opened the chamber. Now this? You know who I am. Riddle twirled the wand. Fascinating. Why did you take Fanny? Anne asked, stalling. She didn't want the basilisk summoned just yet. That unfortunate girl happened to see Ginny open the chamber. I couldn't let her go. But you're not the stars today, he is. Riddle turned to Harry again. I have many questions, Harry Potter. What questions? Harry demanded, fists clenched. Like how a baby, with no powerful magic, defeated the greatest wizard of all time. How did you survive? You're not, Harry interrupted coldly. Not what? Not the greatest wizard. Sorry to disappoint, but that title belongs to Albus Dumbledore. Even at your peak, you didn't dare take Hogwarts. He saw through you then, and you still fear him. Anne winced. Great. Taunt Voldemort when you have nothing in hand. Classic Harry. Riddle's smile vanished, replaced by a hideous scowl. I used only my memory and got Dumbledore kicked out. He's not gone, Harry shot back. Just then, music echoed through the chamber. A crimson bird swooped down from above, its golden tail streaming behind it, claws clutching a battered bundle. Dumbledore's help had arrived. Anne exhaled in relief. The bird flew straight to Harry, dropped the bundle at his feet, and landed on his shoulder. Fox! Harry cried, delighted. It's Dumbledore's phoenix. But Anne was staring at the item Fox had dropped. Riddle laughed. So that's Dumbledore's idea of help, a singing bird and a tattered hat? Feeling brave now, Harry? Safe. Back to the point, Riddle said, still smug. We've faced each other twice. I failed to kill you both times. Why? Tell me everything. Your life depends on it. Nobody knows why you lost power, Harry replied stiffly. Not even me. But I know why you couldn't kill me, my mother died to save me. A Muggle-born. Her sacrifice protected me. He was trembling with rage. I saw what you've become, last year, too. A wreck. You used to be powerful. Now? Pathetic. Hiding. You're a freak. Revolting. Riddle's face twisted, then he forced a grim smile. Ah, so that's it. Her sacrifice. Yes, that's powerful magic. So there's nothing special about you. Funny, I always suspected we were alike. Half-bloods, orphans, raised by muggles, parcel mouths, maybe even similar in looks. But in the end, you're just lucky. That's what I wanted to know. Riddle stopped smiling. He looked at both Anne and Harry, then hissed long and low. While they talked, Anne had pocketed the broken twig. Now, hearing Parseltongue, she shouted, Harry! Hold on to the sorting hat, your weapon is inside. The basilisk is coming. She dashed toward the statue's foot to grab the diary. She didn't yet know how to destroy it, but better to have it in hand. Just as she snatched the diary, a massive basilisk slithered from the statue's mouth. Its green-scaled body gleamed with venomous beauty, thicker than an adult tree trunk. Its flat head and red tongue flicked menacingly. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 40, The End of Second Year. Fox was circling above the basilisk's massive head, while the beast snapped furiously at the phoenix, its mouth wide open, revealing long, razor-thin fangs like military blades. With a sharp dive, Fox drove his golden beak straight into the basilisk's skull. Instantly, a spray of thick black blood rained down like a sudden storm. The basilisk thrashed its tail wildly, nearly striking Anne in the process. Both of the creature's huge, lamp-like yellow eyes had been pecked blind by the phoenix. Black blood gushed onto the floor as the basilisk let out guttural, painful groans. No! Harry and Anne heard Riddle's frantic scream. Forget the bird! Forget the bird! The boy is behind you. You can still smell him. Kill him! Harry, get your weapon out of the hat. Even if it's just that old twig I gave you, use it! Anne shouted, holding on to Fanny with one arm while dragging Ginny out of the basilisk's tail's reach. Harry reached into the sorting hat and pulled out something long, hard, and cold, a gleaming silver sword. Anne, it's a silver sword. Anne tucked the unconscious girls behind one of the columns in the rear of the chamber, then darted to another pillar. Clutching one of the twig bombs, she yanked the white string and hurled it toward the basilisk's tail and Riddle. Boom! With a thunderous explosion, the basilisk's tail burst open with a bloody wound. The beast thrashed even more violently, slamming into the chamber walls, but when the smoke cleared, Riddle stood unharmed. As expected, physical attacks and low-level magic were useless against a memory, a ghost. Anne shifted her focus. The basilisk had to go first, defeat it, and the rest would follow. Dodging chunks of falling stone dislodged by the raging serpent, Anne waited for a chance to strike again. Her only weapon now was a firebomb made from modified flame grass oil. Due to Riddle's constant goading, the basilisk's attention remained fixed on Harry. Anne, meanwhile, was bruised and scraped by falling debris. Harry was desperately dodging the lunges of the serpent's head, searching for an opening to drive the sword in. Slipping behind the basilisk once more, Anne hurled her last firebomb at its wounded tail. It shattered on the stone floor, igniting a searing blaze. Fuel splattered across the injury, and the smell of roasting flesh filled the air. The basilisk screamed in agony, hissing violently as it spun toward its tormentor. "Now, Harry! Go for the head!" Anne bellowed. Harry yanked the string on his last twig bomb and flung it at the basilisk's face. Another explosion rang out, tearing a massive wound into the serpent's head, but it wasn't enough. The beast wasn't dead. Roaring, it lunged at Harry with fangs bared. There was no time to dodge. With both hands gripping the silver sword, Harry plunged it straight into the roof of the basilisk's mouth, burying the blade to its hilt. The creature twisted, convulsed, and went still. But Anne didn't cheer. She had just been struck by a flying shard of stone from the basilisk's death throes. Shielding her head, her left forearm had taken the brunt, a deep gash, now bleeding heavily. Harry yanked the basilisk's fang out of his arm and collapsed, gasping for breath. Fawkes fluttered down beside him, tears dripping from his eyes onto the wound. "You're going to die, Harry Potter," Riddle sneered, floating beside him. "Tisk, tisk. You may have slain the basilisk, but its fang is laced with deadly poison." "Humph," Anne muttered, approaching with her bleeding arm clutched to her side. "Like he's going to die. Haven't you noticed the phoenix crying? Phoenix tears are healing, they neutralize poison. You should be worrying about yourself." She tossed the diary to the floor, crouched, and picked up the venomous fang Harry had dropped. She shot a cold glare at Riddle. What are you doing?" Riddle stammered, losing his composure as he lunged for her. With no hesitation, Anne drove the basilisk fang into the heart of the diary. A blood-curdling, ear-piercing scream filled the chamber as black ink spurted out violently. Riddle twisted and contorted, then vanished into the void. Anne let out a long breath and slumped to the ground. "Finally, it's over." Harry stirred, looking much better, phoenix tears clearly working their magic. Anne glanced at the closed wound on his arm, then down at her still bleeding one. She sighed, of course the protagonist gets faster healing. She tore her tie from the cleanest part of her inner robe and wrapped it tightly around her arm. Harry got up and helped her to her feet. "Where are Ginny and Fanny?" "Oh, now you remember them?" Anne pointed toward the only intact pillar in the chamber. "Over there." As if on cue, a soft sobbing came from behind the pillar. "Harry. I wanted to tell you at breakfast, but..." Ginny had woken up and, seeing the dead basilisk, burst into tears and ran into Harry's arms. Anne knelt down beside Fanny, just as the girl opened her eyes. At first dazed, she suddenly grabbed Anne and wailed, "Anne! A ghost took me! And a huge snake!" Caught off guard, Anne toppled over with Fanny in her arms. "Ow, Fanny! Calm down, it's okay now." Clutching her injured arm to keep it from being jostled, Anne tried to comfort her panicked friend. Fanny's tears fell harder when she spotted the basilisk's corpse behind Anne. "You came to save me." "Anne, wah-ah. No no no, don't start again," Anne muttered, flustered. She really didn't do well with crying girls. After some time, Anne and Harry managed to calm the two down. Together, the four of them staggered out of the chamber. As they made their way through the tunnel, a noise echoed from above. Someone was shifting the rocks. "Ron!" Harry called, hurrying ahead. "Ginny's okay. Fanny too. We found them." A cheer echoed down from the other side. Moments later, Ron's face appeared through a large gap he had cleared. "Ginny," he cried, reaching through to pull her out. "You're alive! I can't believe it. What happened?" But Ginny wouldn't let him touch her, she clung tightly to Harry instead. The rest of them clambered through the gap one by one. They gave a quick explanation and headed toward the exit. Anne noticed Lockhart standing nearby, grinning blankly. Upon learning that his memory had been wiped by his own backfired charm, Anne couldn't help but comment, "Serves him right." For once, Fanny didn't disagree. Lockhart's image in her mind was now thoroughly shattered. When they reached the bottom of the pipe, the question remained, how were they going to get back up? Fawkes suddenly flapped down beside Harry, glowing eyes bright in the dark and long golden tail feathers swaying. "Wait, it can fly, maybe we could hold on and let it lift us up," Ron suggested. Fawkes nodded, almost like a person. "Wow, no wonder Dumbledore keeps it. It's so smart," Fanny said in awe. After a brief discussion, they grabbed hold of Fawkes in pairs, and the phoenix soared gracefully upward, carrying them out of the Chamber of Secrets. By the time they landed on the damp floor of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, the sink had already slid back into place behind them. "Phew, finally," Anne muttered, clutching her arm. The tie she'd used as a bandage was soaked in blood. Her face was pale as a sheet. "Ugh! I think I need to get to the hospital wing. You guys take Fanny and Ginny to find Dumbledore, okay? I'll come with you, Anne." "You don't look good," Fanny said, clearly worried. "No, you heard what they said, your parents and Ginny's are already at the school. Dumbledore will need your help calming them down." Anne swayed slightly, the adrenaline wearing off. "But I'll go with Anne," Ron offered. "You go see your parents first." Even Harry chimed in to reassure her. Reluctantly, Fanny nodded. "Okay, but Ron, you have to make sure Anne gets there safely." When Anne reached the hospital wing, Madame Pomfrey and Professor Sprout were just finishing up with the last student who'd been petrified. The moment they saw her, gasps erupted. Pomfrey rushed over and immediately grabbed bandages and potions. "Anne, dear! What happened?" Professor Sprout exclaimed. Hermione jumped from her bed and ran to Anne's side, eyes full of concern. Anne removed her tattered robe and slumped into a chair. Her shirt underneath was just as filthy, dirt, soot, and blood all mixed together. "It's a long story." Ron stepped forward proudly and launched into an animated retelling of their entire adventure, how they discovered the diary, the truth behind it, and their battle in the chamber, all from his and Harry's combined point of view. While Anne extended her arm for treatment, Madame Pomfrey carefully unwrapped the makeshift bandage, revealing a gory wound about 6 or 7 centimeters long. Hermione gasped. "You're lucky it's not deep," Madame Pomfrey said, inspecting it. "No scar, just a few days healing." She uncorked a bottle and poured the liquid directly onto Anne's arm. "Ah, it stings." Anne's eyes welled up. "You should have thought of that before doing something dangerous," Pomfrey said, not unkindly. Hermione sat beside her, gently reassuring, "It'll be over soon, Anne. Just hang in there." After tending to her deeper wounds and applying ointment to the minor ones, Pomfrey handed Anne a clean hospital gown. "You'll need to stay the night." Reluctantly, Anne complied. When she came back out, Ron had just finished telling the story, surrounded by curious students. Professor Sprout had already gone. Anne sat on an empty bed. Hermione sat beside her, eyes on her bandaged arm. Anne noticed the stare. "What is it? You risked your life for Fanny." "Well, yeah. She's my friend, so of course I..." Hermione looked at her seriously. "If it were me, would you come save me too?" Anne looked into her warm brown eyes and, before she could think, answered, "Of course I would." Hermione's eyes lit up, and she gave Anne a quick hug before blushing and pulling away. Just then, Professor McGonagall arrived, announcing a celebratory feast for everyone who had been petrified. The hospital wing quickly emptied. Anne remained on her bed, dazed. Why did I just promise that? Hermione's not going to get kidnapped, right? Then again, she's one of the main characters. She'll be fine. No problem. Just as she was lost in thought, Fanny, Ginny, and Harry returned. Madame Pomfrey checked them over. Ginny and Fanny were fine, though Harry was held overnight for observation due to his earlier poisoning. Before leaving, Fanny promised Anne, "I'll bring you the best food from the feast." Anne nodded furiously, making the others laugh. Later that evening, Anne was snacking in bed when Dumbledore entered the hospital wing. "Miss Reeve, don't be nervous," he said kindly, sitting beside her. Anne relaxed a little, but looked at him curiously. "Such rare amber eyes. They remind me of your mother, an exceptional witch." "I don't really remember her. Just photos," Anne murmured. "Photos are powerful things. Memories made real." He glanced at her bandaged arm. "Madame Pomfrey did a fine job." "Yes. She's wonderful." Dumbledore smiled. "It's rare to find such courage and kindness in a Slytherin, Miss Reeve. Your actions deserve praise." Anne blushed. "But Fanny got captured partly because of me. And yet you still chose to go." She's my friend." "You followed your heart, Anne. That choice defines who you are." Anne was confused. "Wait, why is he really here?" Then Dumbledore asked, "May I ask why you used the basilisk fang in the diary?" Anne explained her reasoning clearly and logically, how nothing else worked, how she deduced the diary's weakness. Dumbledore smiled and even teased her about her twig bombs. To her horror, he correctly guessed she'd used a banned substance. She fell silent, cheeks burning. "I won't scold a clever student for inventiveness," Dumbledore said. "Oh, and no one's told you yet, final exams are cancelled. No transfiguration exam." "Really?" Anne beamed. "I suspect Professor McGonagall won't be pleased," he chuckled, ruffling her hair. "I'll leave you to rest." "Oh, and Aaron was right. Uncle Aaron writes to you." "Why wouldn't he?" Dumbledore replied with a twinkle in his eye, then departed. "Wait, so Aaron knows everything because of the headmaster? Ugh, I'll have to deal with him when I get home." The rest of the summer term passed in warm sunshine. Hogwarts returned to normal. Dada was cancelled, and Lucius Malfoy was removed from the Board of Governors. At King's Cross Station, Anne said goodbye to her friends, already looking forward to the peaceful break ahead. Little did she know, trouble would soon find her again. A/N, the story moves a bit fast-paced on purpose, mainly because we already know the main events from canon, so I'm not spending too long rehashing what we've all seen before. Also, the story between the main couple will properly begin when they're a little older, 4th year at most. So for now, it's more about setting the stage, building the characters, and having fun with the early chaos. A/N, the story moves a bit fast-paced on purpose, mainly because we already know the main events from canon, so I'm not spending too long rehashing what we've all seen before. Also, the story between the main couple will properly begin when they're a little older, 4th year at most. So for now, it's more about setting the stage, building the characters, and having fun with the early chaos. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 41, The Roland Family. Let's rewind to 2 days before Anne's school holiday began, at Aaron's home. Aaron had arranged to finish some of his work early in order to celebrate Anne's 13th birthday. This year, her birthday fell 3 days after the start of the Hogwarts holiday, so he wanted to make preparations in advance. But less than a day after returning home, Aaron received 2 letters, both of which put him in a terrible mood. The first was from Dumbledore, a long letter briefly explaining Anne's performance at school and her involvement in the Chamber of Secrets incident. Hearing about Anne's injury made Aaron extremely worried. But the second letter gave him an even bigger headache. It was a howler. A howler from a woman in France, Diana Roland, Sonia Roland's older sister, and Anne's aunt. The howler only contained one line. Aaron Hall, how wonderful! I'm so impressed by what you've done. That very afternoon, a furious woman stormed out of the fireplace in Aaron's living room. Without saying a word, she pointed her wand straight at him and cast a spell. Luckily, Aaron had anticipated this. He dodged in time, though a wooden table in the living room exploded into splinters. Aaron Hall! You dare to dodge? Do you know what you've done? You had the nerve to intercept my personal mail using your brother's help. Diana shouted, slamming a copy of the Daily Prophet onto the floor. The headline detailed the Chamber of Secrets incident at Hogwarts and how it had been resolved by 3 students and a professor. In one corner of the article, Anne Reeve's name was briefly mentioned, but it had been circled several times in blue ink. If I hadn't read the Daily Prophet this morning, just how long were you planning to keep this from me? Diana's voice was furious, though she'd stopped casting spells. Her wand, however, was still gripped tightly in her hand. Aaron slowly stood up from behind the sofa, equally agitated. Yes, I admit it, I had your letter intercepted. That was wrong of me. But I know exactly what you were planning, you were going to tell Anne everything that happened. She's part of the Roland family. She has to know the truth. Diana shot back without hesitation. She's a Reaver. Not a Roland. Aaron bellowed. She's Sonia's daughter. Don't forget that. The Ministry of Magic legally recognized her full name as Anne Roland Reeve. As the first in line to inherit the Roland family estate, she has every right to know her origins. Aaron's eyes turned red with anger. What do you know? You've been off in France all these years with that fancy job of yours. How many times have you even visited Anne? Tell me. Do you even know how old she is this year? What day does her birthday fall on? Diana was momentarily stunned. Her presence faltered a little, but she still answered angrily, she's 12, I haven't forgotten that. But what does that have to do with the crap you pulled? Aaron didn't lower his voice. Oh, so you do remember she's 12? Anne lost her parents at such a young age. And when she was 8, her own uncle sent her to an orphanage. Do you even know what those 3 years were like for her? She got sick on her very first day there, so tiny and pale, lying all alone in bed, no one taking care of her. By the time I got word and rushed to see her, she'd already been sick in bed for 2 days. Do you have any idea how much that broke my heart? Diana hadn't known Anne had been sent to an orphanage. Her anger subsided, and she said quietly, that was ministry protocol. Mixed-blood children without magical signs have to stay in the Muggle world. I had no say in it. Besides, I visited her once at the Garnet family's home, and she seemed to be doing well. Aaron snorted. Visited a few times, did you? You, the deputy head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation? I guess you forgot you even had a niece in the UK. But that still doesn't give you the right to intercept my mail. You actually went behind my back and applied to be Anne's legal guardian. I will file a formal complaint. That was Aaron's breaking point. He exploded, shouting, "You just want to dump all the family's burdens onto a 12-year-old. What were you doing at 12, huh? Anne's already been through so much, you can't even let her have a proper childhood." "I never said I would. You just said you were going to tell her the truth about her parents. And the family. You were going to pile all that on her. Don't you think it's cruel to burden a child like that?" "That's exactly why I intercepted your letter. I knew you wouldn't discuss it with anyone first." Diana frowned slightly, then calmed down. "But she has to know eventually." Aaron took 2 deep breaths, forcing himself to speak more evenly. "Of course she does. I never planned to keep it from you either. I was going to tell you this summer. I was hoping we could agree to wait until Anne turns 16 to tell her the truth. Her time at Hogwarts should be happy, simple, free of burdens. She deserves that." Aaron stared at her intently. Diana glared back, then finally sat down in an armchair. "I'm still applying for legal guardianship of Anne." Aaron sat down on the sofa and nodded. "You have every right. I won't oppose it." He snapped his fingers, and Oral came out of the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. Diana took a sip, glanced around, and asked, "Is Anne living here now?" Aaron perked up as soon as Anne was mentioned. "Yes. I even brought Oral over full-time to help take care of her. Anne's a very clever girl. You probably don't know, she was sorted into Slytherin, the same house as Lambert." He stood up and pointed excitedly toward the small greenhouse in the courtyard. "Anne's really into herbology. I built that greenhouse for her. Her room's on the 3rd floor, I can show you." "How long are you staying in the UK?" "Anne's coming home in 2 days. Maybe we could go pick her up together." Diana put down her tea and stood up too. She looked at the greenhouse, then motioned for Aaron to lead her upstairs. "I came by plane and temporarily used the ministry's flu network. I'll probably need to send them a letter later. Since I'm in the UK, I might as well stop by the family estate and take care of some things." "That's great. Then we can pick up Anne together. I bet she'll be thrilled. Oh, and about her birthday in May, we need to plan it together. Do you want her to spend it in Paris or at the family estate?" "Last year, I took her to Tanzania." Aaron happily chatted as they walked. At King's Cross Station, Anne pulled her suitcase and got off the train in a hurry, eager to ask Aaron about the letter Dumbledore had mentioned. But as soon as she exited the station, she not only saw Aaron waving at her beside a black car, she also saw a tall, elegant woman standing beside him. Golden hair, impeccably dressed in chic French fashion. Anne's first thought, did Aaron get a girlfriend? Diana's eyes lit up the moment she saw Anne. Though Anne had short black hair, her amber eyes were just like the rest of the Roland family. Her small, round face was adorably soft. Diana could see glimpses of Sonia and Lambert in her. She walked right up to Anne, crouched down, hugged her tightly, kissed her forehead, and gently ruffled her hair with a warm smile. Anne didn't dodge. Up close, she noticed that Diana's eyes were the same amber shade as hers, and she bore a strong resemblance to her mother in the photos. She was stunned. Aaron walked over, took the suitcase from Anne's hand, ruffled her hair, and smiled. "Anne, this is your aunt, your mother's sister, Diana Roland." It felt like something exploded in Anne's mind. "What? There are more people from the mysterious Roland family? I have an aunt. Aaron's been hiding this all along." Her eyes darted between Diana and Aaron, full of confusion. Diana looked into her amber eyes and softly said, "All right, silly girl. Let's get in the car. I'll explain everything on the way." She stood up, took Anne's hand, and led her to the black car, with Aaron following behind, dragging the suitcase. In the car, Diana and Anne sat in the back while Aaron started the engine. Once she'd calmed down, Anne hesitantly asked, Diana. Aunt Diana. Diana winced slightly, she hadn't quite prepared to be called that yet. It sounded a little strange. Smiling, she replied, Anne, you can just call me Diana when we're alone. Aunt is fine for letters or formal occasions. Anne nodded and said offhandedly, yeah, I thought it was weird to call someone so pretty and young Aunt. Diana burst out laughing, and Aaron laughed too from the front seat. Diana, you'll have to get used to this. Anne always talks like a little grown-up. Realizing what she'd just said, Anne puffed out her cheeks and pretended to pout. Diana couldn't help reaching out and pinching her cheek. Seeing the warm light in Diana's eyes, Anne quickly asked, but, why are you only coming to see me now? Diana's smile faltered slightly, and she glanced at Aaron before replying with a teasing tone, because someone at the ministry made a mistake, which is why you're only seeing me now. Aaron hunched slightly in the driver's seat. Anne caught all of this and started to understand why Aaron always avoided talking about the Roland family. So this is it. Aaron must have done something to keep Diana from knowing I went to Hogwarts. Diana, have you not been in the UK for a while? Your accent sounds a bit different, Anne asked. You're so clever, Anne. Diana ruffled her hair again. I've been living in Paris for the past 3 years. I haven't been back until now. How about spending the summer with me in Paris? You can stay with me there. What do you think? Aaron quickly added, don't worry about your plants. Oral can take good care of them. Anne had a feeling they'd already discussed this before picking her up. Maybe her birthday would even be in Paris this year. That thought excited her, the city of romance. What would it be like? With a bright smile, Anne exclaimed, yes. I want to go. Diana smiled, and Aaron let out a breath of relief. Diana then asked Anne about school, especially about the Chamber of Secrets. After all, it had made headlines. Anne gave the credit to the trio from Gryffindor and glossed over her part, only mentioning that she went to rescue Fanny and ended up getting hit by a falling rock. Madame Pomfrey had healed her just fine. She even pulled up her sleeve to show them. Though Aaron encouraged adventure, he never wanted Anne to be in real danger. Diana was even more concerned. After all, the two of them were the last remaining members of the Roland family, which had always been small in number. A/N, hee, new characters around Anne are finally making their debut. Looks like her background isn't so simple after all. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 42, Paris, France. The Roland family separated from a pure-blooded secluded wizarding lineage in 1873. Their family crest was a silver, shield-shaped emblem bearing the initials RL for Roland as a backdrop, with a proud elephant in the center. On the second underground floor of the British Ministry of Magic, inside the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Diana knelt down and carefully pinned that silver shield-shaped badge to Anne's robe. Patting her shoulder, she said, all right, Anne, from now on you can wear our Roland family crest. Don't underestimate it. After these 2 days of introductions, you should understand that although our family is small, we made our name through international trade. With this badge, you can withdraw up to 5% of the family's assets from any Gringotts branch in the world, no questions asked. Anne blinked, lightly touching the badge at her chest, feeling a heavy weight settle in her heart. She quickly asked, whoa, but what if someone takes it? Don't worry, Anne, Diana said warmly. Withdrawals require your personal signature. Plus, the ministry has registered this badge, only 2 exist. It's also enchanted, so it can't be misused. From today onward, you're officially the primary heir of the Roland family. Her tone grew solemn by the end. Anne instantly tensed up. All morning, she had been accompanying Diana around the Ministry of Magic, signing one document after another. Now, her full legal name was Anne Roland Reeve. She had two guardians, Aaron and Diana, and had just become the first heir to the Roland family. The family owned a modest estate and a small castle in the UK, which she had visited once with Diana. The castle wasn't large, but it was tended by 6 house elves. Sensing Anne's nerves, Diana chuckled and tried to reassure her. "Relax, Anne. You're still young. You won't need to shoulder any real family responsibilities for a long time. You're not of age yet. So let's leave the future for the future, all right? Come on, we're done here. This afternoon, we're flying to Paris. I've already prepared your room, I think you'll love it. You'll even have a little studio space. I haven't furnished it yet, but you can bring what you like or shop for it once we're there." That caught Anne's curiosity. Is there a magical government in France like the ministry here? Do they have something like Diagon Alley too? Then she added nervously, "But I don't speak French. How will I talk to people?" Diana smiled. "The magical world in France is something you'll have to explore for yourself. And don't worry about the language. I'll teach you. French really isn't that hard, you'll see." That afternoon, Anne, Aaron, and Diana boarded a flight from London to Paris. Sitting by the window, Anne's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She felt almost like she had when she first arrived in this world, everything surreal and dreamlike. This sudden, massive shift in her identity left her dazed. Fortunately, both adults picked up on her inner turmoil. Over the next few days, they showed her around Paris without mentioning family burdens or responsibilities even once. In fact, Aaron privately scolded Diana for overwhelming Anne so soon, but that's another story. Anne celebrated her 13th birthday in Paris. Aaron stayed for nearly 2 weeks before work called him back. Diana, always busy herself, could only spare about 5 days, including 2 in London, before diving into her own responsibilities again. But Anne didn't mind. With her summer homework from Hogwarts, her own magical experiments, and a growing interest in French, she quickly found herself immersed in a productive and fulfilling routine. She even returned to 2 hobbies she hadn't touched in years, piano and guitar. Diana was the deputy director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, stationed in Paris to manage diplomatic relations between the British Ministry and other European magical governments. In effect, she served as the UK's ambassador to the European wizarding world. She was also the president of the International Association for Magical Trade Standards and the current head of the Roland family. Aaron had once whispered to Anne that Diana was a complete workaholic, and now, living in her house, Anne saw it for herself. Diana's home was a 3-story villa in central Paris, staffed by a house elf named Manda. The ground floor housed the living room, dining area, and a formal parlor. The second floor held Diana's bedroom and office. The third floor, once a guest space and storeroom, had been renovated into Anne's personal bedroom, study, and magical lab. What surprised Anne most was the study. It was filled with books on economics and trade in French, German, and English, plus an upright piano. When Anne asked about the piano, Diana told her that the Muggle world had much to teach, especially in business and trade. The house itself had been purchased from a Muggle friend, and she had kept the piano because she liked it. But that piano stirred something deep in Anne. Memories from her past life surged up. In her former life, she was born in 1991 in a region that had grown rapidly after economic reforms. Her family, comfortably middle class, had poured resources into her education. Inspired by news of musical prodigies being admitted to elite American music conservatories, her parents had pushed her into piano lessons at a young age. She trained for 12 years, only to rebel in university and switch to guitar. But in that moment, standing in Paris, seeing the piano, all those memories rushed back, vivid and raw. When she opened the lid and pressed a single white key, her tears fell silently. She didn't even know why she was crying, but she cried. Diana hadn't expected that. She immediately dropped to her knees, hugged Anne, and comforted her gently. After the sobs faded, Anne offered a made-up explanation, that as a child, she had often envied kids with pianos and never thought she'd have the chance to play one, let alone live in Paris and explore the world. She'd once thought she'd grow up in an orphanage, alone. Diana was deeply moved. She immediately promised to hire a piano teacher and told Anne that whatever she wanted, whether to learn, buy, or do, she could always come to her. Anne felt a mix of warmth and guilt, but even more than that, a growing awareness that this world was real, and filled with kindness. By July, the heart of summer had arrived. In central Paris, Anne now carried a guitar case on her back and sipped coffee as she walked to her teacher's home. She had convinced Diana to let her study music with a Muggle teacher, Casey Axe, a 45-year-old graduate of the Royal Academy of Music in London who had married a French woman and now lived in Paris teaching instruments. Anne loved her new summer routine, like an ordinary girl, walking or biking through the streets of Paris, immersed in music. She saved magic for the evenings, doing her Hogwarts homework, experimenting, and chatting with Diana when she came home late. They shared jokes, swapped language tips, and Anne often practiced her French with Madame Axe, who was delighted by her talent and charm. The whole Axe family adored her. At the end of July, Anne received a letter from Fanny. Dear Anne. This is amazing, I didn't expect you to be in Paris too. Humph. How dare you come here and not tell me? Were you planning to explore all by yourself? I'm here with my parents, they're here for work, and will be in Paris for about a week. They heard you're here too and would love to meet you, if that's okay with you? I can't believe you've been here over 2 months without saying a word. No matter what, you have to meet up with me. I want to know everything you've been doing here. Since my parents are busy with work, you'll have to take me out and entertain me. Fanny. Anne wasn't thrilled about meeting Fanny's parents. She figured they probably wanted to thank her for saving their daughter, but Anne didn't feel she deserved thanks. She partly blamed herself for Fanny getting into danger in the first place. Still, it didn't feel right to refuse. So she told Diana. That evening over dinner, Diana encouraged her to accept. She also pointed out that after the Chamber of Secrets incident, Fanny was likely under strict parental supervision, and any outing would definitely need approval. Anne wasn't sure if Fanny had done it on purpose, but she suspected she'd been roped into something. On the day of the meeting, Diana accompanied her to give moral support. Anne had heard all about the prestigious Charles family, even Malfoy never dared mess with Fanny. Fanny's parents were gentle and refined. They thanked Anne politely and invited her to visit their home sometime. They readily agreed to let the girls explore Paris together, though they did arrange a car to pick up Fanny at Diana's place by 8:30 p.m. sharp. As it turned out, Diana also worked with the Charles family on occasion. When Fanny saw the crest pinned to Anne's robes, she was shocked. But in front of her parents, she leaned in and whispered, "You have to explain that to me later." After the adults had exchanged pleasantries and left for work, the girls were finally alone. "So, where are we going today?" Anne asked. "Hang on, what's that badge?" Fanny pointed excitedly. "Wait, you're really from the Roland family?" Anne nodded. "Yeah. It's true. My full name now is Anne Roland Reeve. My mother's name was Sonia Roland. The woman earlier, that's my aunt, Diana Roland." Fanny's eyes widened. "Then you have to tell me, why did your family split from that pure-blooded wizarding line? Which one was it? What happened?" Anne shrugged. "I don't know. Diana won't tell me until I'm of age. So honestly, you probably know as much as I do. Now, where are we going first?" Fanny pouted a little but quickly brightened. "Fine, whatever. So, what have you done all summer?" Well, I've been here just over 2 months. I've visited most of the big sites with Aaron and Diana, Louvre, Notre Dame, Eiffel Tower, Musée Guimet, Sacré-Cœur, all of them. The Eiffel Tower's nearby, want to start there? Perfect. I haven't been here since I was 10. I'll leave it to you, your sense of direction's way better than mine. They spent 2 wonderful days together. Every evening, they had dinner at Diana's house, and Fanny was picked up at exactly 7 p.m. On the third and final day, Fanny arrived early, excited for their last adventure together. In the car, she asked, "So, what's our plan today?" Anne tossed a French franc in the air and grinned. "First, we hit the Louvre, and should be able to see about half in the morning. Then lunch at a gallery cafe in Place du Marche, try the savory crepes and cheese, with the fruit juice. After that, we'll continue at the museum. Around 3, we can rent bikes or take a boat along the Seine. Then we'll head back toward my place and have dinner at a shop nearby, their orange glazed pork is amazing." Fanny beamed. "Sounds great. And you'll keep telling stories about the exhibits like yesterday?" Anne nodded. "Yep, same as before. We walk and talk. A/N, just a fun hint, the Roland family crest has a deeper meaning, try guessing why the elephant was chosen and what it symbolizes about their break from the pure-blood wizarding line. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon/crimson_lore. Chapter 43, A Secret That Can't Be Told. The Louvre wasn't too crowded today, it was Monday, after all. Most visitors were tourists in large tour groups, with only a few individuals wandering the museum alone. Anne had read several books and maps about the Louvre's collections and was already familiar with the stories and locations of many exhibits. Leisurely, she guided Fanny along a route she had planned around some of the more interesting artifacts. "Take a look at this stone," Anne said, pointing. "It might look like a dull black rock, but it's actually the Code of Hammurabi. It's over 3,700 years old, commissioned by a king from ancient Babylon, one of the 4 great ancient civilizations." She began to explain the history of the artifact in English. Fanny listened intently. Anne's stories were always engaging and insightful, and Fanny often felt like she was learning something new just by being around her. Passers-by occasionally paused to glance at them. It wasn't every day you saw 2 young girls calmly touring the museum while chatting in fluent English. "So, that's why written law is more reliable than unwritten rules." Anne was mid-sentence when a familiar voice interrupted her. "Oh my gosh, Merlin's beard!" "Fanny?" "Anne," someone exclaimed, rushing toward them. Anne didn't have time to react before she was suddenly pulled into a tight hug. Fanny cried out in surprise as well. "Merlin's beard! Hermione? What are you doing here?" The one hugging Anne was none other than Hermione, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 months. She released Anne, equally stunned. "I should be asking you. What are you doing here, in Paris?" Behind Hermione, 2 adults jogged up. Anne recognized them from their brief encounter in Diagon Alley, the Grangers. Hermione quickly made introductions. "These are my parents. I'm on vacation in France with them. Mum, Dad, this is my friend from school, Anne Reeve, you met her once in Diagon Alley. And this is Fanny Charles." Anne and Fanny greeted them politely, and the Grangers smiled warmly in return. They each gave a brief explanation of what brought them to Paris. "You've been in Paris this whole summer?" Hermione asked in amazement. "And you have an aunt here?" Anne offered a vague explanation, but it still left Hermione full of questions. Thankfully, Fanny stepped in with a cheerful suggestion that Hermione and her parents join them for the rest of their Louvre visit. Fanny had said, "Anne's been in Paris for over 2 months. She spent 2 whole days showing me around and was an amazing tour guide. Since you're here on vacation and probably not that familiar with the place, just follow her." She even shared the schedule Anne had planned for the day. Unsurprisingly, Hermione readily agreed to the idea. And so, Anne took on the role of guide once again. By lunchtime, the 5 of them sat by the window in a colonnade café on Place du Carrousel. The sun bathed the Louvre in golden light, and the glass pyramid designed by Imp gleamed brightly. Tourists lounged around the fountains just outside. Fanny glanced out the window and grinned. "Anne, this café you picked has the perfect view of the pyramid. I also really enjoyed all the stories you told about the exhibits," Hermione added. Her parents nodded in agreement, though they were mostly thrilled Hermione had unexpectedly reunited with a school friend in Paris. Anne scratched her nose and laughed. "Fanny, you're exaggerating. I only read a few books about the Louvre's collections and did a bit of prep last night. As for this café, I've eaten here before, and the food was great. You guys should give it a try." She eagerly took the menus from the waiter and started recommending dishes. Hermione and Fanny exchanged amused glances and smiled knowingly. After a hearty lunch, Fanny persuaded Hermione to spend the afternoon touring with them. She promised the Grangers she'd have Hermione back at their hotel by 9 p.m. and gave them Anne's aunt's address and phone number without hesitation. The Grangers were happy to agree. Their afternoon plan was to go shopping on the Champs-Élysées, so Hermione's absence wouldn't be a big deal. Besides, they were simply delighted she had run into friends here in France. But Anne, upon hearing Fanny blurt out her aunt's address and phone number so easily, couldn't help thinking Fanny was a terrible friend. "Oh no," she thought. "I can already picture the flood of letters this summer, or worse, phone calls every few days." After they finished touring the Louvre, at 3:45 p.m., Anne turned to Fanny and Hermione. "Next up on our itinerary is a scenic tour along the Seine River. We have 2 options: we can either rent bikes and ride along the riverbanks, or take a boat tour. Either way, we'll take the metro back. If we cycle, we'll return via Line 1, if we take the boat, we'll return on Line 7. What do you think?" Fanny answered instantly, "Bikes. I can ride, and it sounds fun." Anne noticed Hermione blush slightly. The brilliant scholar must not be very athletic. She wasn't much of a Quidditch fan either, and apparently, she didn't know how to ride a bike. Anne didn't want to ruin the mood, so she took Hermione's hand and led her toward the bike rental shop. "This is a great cycling route. I'll give you a lift, don't worry, I won't let you fall. I'm pretty good on a bike. I've been riding one to class these past 2 months." "Class?" Hermione caught that last word with interest. Fanny gasped. "Anne? You're taking classes? Why didn't I know this? Were you keeping it from me?" Anne laughed awkwardly. "Ahem, not really hiding it, I just started recently. I've been learning piano and guitar." "Why?" "My grandmother forced me to learn piano. It's so boring." Fanny groaned. "It's just a little hobby." "Ah, here we are." The shop was small and sat right along the street. Several bikes with Roman numeral plates were parked out front. Anne entered, spoke briefly in French, paid, and came back with 2 keys. She'd shown off her French at the café earlier, so Hermione wasn't surprised anymore. Fanny had studied a bit of French too, but only the basics. Anne, on the other hand, had lived in a French-speaking environment for over 2 months, and with her near photographic memory, basic daily conversation was no longer a problem. Anne mounted a pale blue bicycle and motioned for Hermione to hop on the back. Hermione sat sideways. "Ready? Hold on to me, it'll be more stable that way," Anne reminded her. Hermione wrapped her arms around Anne's waist, feeling the rise and fall of her breath. Anne turned to Fanny. "Stick close. You can ride side by side when the road's straight, but fall in behind me for turns, all right?" Fanny nodded, and they were off. That afternoon, they cycled along the Seine, stopping now and then to enjoy the view, buy drinks, sit on benches, guess the origins of tourists on the riverboats, and cross bridges while Anne shared historical facts. Eventually, they looped around the river and returned their bikes. Anne checked her watch. 6:32 p.m. They returned the bikes and walked to the metro. When they reached the area near Aunt Diana's house, it was exactly 7 o'clock. Anne pointed to a white townhouse across the road. "That's my Aunt Diana's place. But we're not eating there tonight, I'm treating you two to dinner somewhere nice." She led them to a cozy street-side restaurant with a green, weathered door framed by 4 glass panes. As she opened it, a bell above the door chimed. The inside was small, enough for about 30 to 40 diners. A piano took up a sizable portion of the room. The lighting was warm and soft, with 4 vintage oil lamps in the corners. A half-wall window let in the last rays of sunset, casting a golden glow across the restaurant. Despite the warmth in color, the room was cool thanks to the fans on the walls. Only 2 tables were occupied. Benvenue greeted an older gentleman in a suit and bow tie, a white napkin draped over his arm. When he saw Anne, he smiled and switched to English. "Anne, what a rare sight, you've brought friends today." Anne returned the smile. "Mr. Vegas, these are my friends, Hermione Granger and Fanny Charles." He gave them both a polite nod. "Welcome, young ladies. I believe this table will suit you well." He led them to a 4-person table and set out cutlery. Anne took a seat, her friends still a bit lost in the moment. Mr. Vegas handed each of them a menu. Anne placed hers aside. "Order whatever you like, the food here is guaranteed to be good." Mr. Vegas chuckled. "You flatter me, Anne. But indeed, anything you wish is no trouble." Hermione didn't even open her menu. "Anne, haven't you only been in France for 2 months?" Fanny, who was looking at the menu, glanced up curiously. Anne smiled as she watched Mr. Vegas return to fetch an extra setting. "Well, he's the owner here. I happened to walk by this place once, came in for a meal, and fell in love with the food. I've been coming back ever since." "Figures," Hermione and Fanny thought, exchanging a look. Mr. Vegas came back and grinned. "She's being modest. Honestly, Anne's more like my teacher." The girls looked at him in surprise. "My piano teacher," he clarified. Anne muttered, "Don't exaggerate, I just corrected a small mistake." "For me, that was a huge improvement," he said sincerely. The girls leaned forward eagerly for more. Since the restaurant wasn't busy, he pulled up a chair and sat down. Anne tried to stop him. "You still have a business to run." He smiled warmly. "I didn't open this place for business. Sharing a story with 2 lovely ladies is much more rewarding, isn't it?" Anne rolled her eyes. This guy. Last time, she'd casually pointed out an error in his playing, and he'd talked her ear off for nearly 2 hours. Fanny and Hermione put down their menus. Clearly, the story was more appealing than dinner. Anne raised a hand. "Vegas, keep it short, I'm starving." He laughed and told the tale of how he self-taught piano for a year, how he met Anne when she started coming in regularly, and how she corrected a mistake in his piece. They became friends after that. "I always felt something was off in that melody," he said, "but I never understood why, until Anne pointed it out." "It's a common beginner mistake," Anne shrugged. "I made it too, which is probably why I recognized it." Vegas looked at her with admiration. "Anne, I've heard many piano pieces, but the way you play..." "Ahem, can we please order now?" Anne interrupted, rubbing her stomach. Why did I ever talk to him so much? Sensing her mood, Vegas nodded. "Right, time to eat." They ordered quickly with Anne's help. When Vegas left, Fanny turned to Anne, beaming. "I've never seen you play piano, why don't you show us?" "No," Anne replied flatly. "But dinner won't arrive for a while," Hermione added, equally curious. "Besides," Fanny pressed on, "we're both leaving Paris tomorrow. This is the perfect atmosphere." Seeing Mr. Vegas return from the kitchen, Hermione boldly said, I'm sure he'd love to hear a song. I'd be honored, Vegas chimed in. Would you play something for us? Anne sat at the piano and opened the lid. She glanced back at them, momentarily blank. Fine, she thought, just one piece. But what should I play? Her fingers moved on their own, and she began. The melody built, the tempo quickened, and with the final note, silence fell. Applause broke out. Anne rose and closed the lid. That was beautiful, Mr. Vegas said. What's the name of that piece? I've never heard it before. Anne paused. It's called Secret. The three exchanged confused looks. Anne's gaze drifted back to the piano. That's the title, Secret. It was composed by an Eastern musician, part of a story. What story? Fanny perked up immediately. Anne began slowly, between bites of dinner, telling the tale of a gifted boy, a mysterious girl, a song that could only be played in an old music room, and a secret. She finished with, and that's the story. No one spoke for a moment. Anne checked her watch, 8:25. She had been eating as she spoke, and now she was the last one finished. Mr. Vegas, check please. That was delicious, as always. I need to get my friends home. Vegas smiled. For such a magical story and song, dinner's on me tonight. Don't refuse. Anne sighed. All right, thank you. As you wish. Hermione and Fanny also thanked him. As they stepped outside, Anne waved goodbye and led the girls down the darkening street. Street lamps glowed warmly along the road. Aunt Diana wasn't home yet, so they waited outside. Soon, a black car pulled up. Hermione asked before getting in, that story and song, how do you know them? Anne smiled mysteriously. It's a secret. She waved as the car pulled away. Call me when you get to the hotel. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 44, The Start of Third Year. Dear Miss Reeve, please be advised that the new school year begins on September 1st. The Hogwarts Express will depart from platform 9 3/4 at 11 o'clock from King's Cross Station. On certain weekends, third-year students are permitted to visit Hogsmeade. Please have the attached permission slip signed by your parent or guardian. A book list for the new school year is also enclosed. Yours sincerely, Professor McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Anne pulled the book list and permission slip from the envelope. She gave the list a quick glance and paused when she saw the title, The Monster Book of Monsters, sighing softly, looks like it's going to be a tough year. That evening, Anne handed the permission slip to Diana, who happily signed her name in the Guardians section, her signature so large it filled the entire line. After signing, Diana shared stories about her own experiences in Hogsmeade back in the day. The last Tuesday of August, Charles de Gaulle Airport, Paris. Diana placed a gentle kiss on Anne's forehead, ruffled her hair, and stood up. See you at Christmas, sweet Anne. With her guitar slung over her shoulder and Erin carrying her suitcase, the two waved goodbye and headed toward the gate. Thursday afternoon, Diagon Alley, London. At Madame Malkin's Robes for All Occasions, Erin took the bag containing Anne's new robes and followed her out the door. As he pushed it open, he asked, Anne, we're heading to Flourish and Blotts next, right? Yeah, I need to get my elective books for the term. Anne followed him out. Oh hey, Anne, isn't that your friend? Harry Potter. Across the street, a crowd had gathered in front of the Quidditch supplies shop. Just outside the crowd stood a black-haired boy straining to peer through the display window. Hey! Harry Potter! Erin called out, walking over and patting his shoulder. Harry turned around, surprised for a moment before smiling brightly. Anne? You're back from Paris? Hello, Mr. Hall. I came back a couple of days ago, Anne replied. Did you finish your school shopping already? She glanced at the crowd. What's going on over there? I haven't bought my books yet. I was just curious why there were so many people, Harry said. Aaron, being taller, looked over the crowd and said excitedly, it's a new model broomstick, looks amazing. It's called the Fire, something. Goes from 0 to 150 miles per hour in 10 seconds. Breaking charms apparently top-notch. Price on request. The Irish international team just ordered 7 of them, the shopkeeper called out. This is the broom of choice for the World Cup. Wow, Harry gasped. The crowd thinned just enough for him to spot the Fire something on display in the window. I heard you became a seeker for Gryffindor your first year. That's awesome. I used to be a chaser back in my day, I still miss playing at Hogwarts sometimes. Aaron and Harry quickly hit it off, bonding over Quidditch. The 3 of them walked and chatted their way to Flourish and Blots. The shop window, which usually displayed massive spellbooks with gold embossed covers, now featured a large iron cage filled with copies of the Monster Book of Monsters. The books were locked inside, violently jostling and biting at one another, with torn pages flying everywhere. Aaron's eyes lit up. Whoa, is this the textbook your Care of Magical Creatures professor assigned this year? Anne instinctively stepped back. Of course, Hagrid's chosen textbook would be something vicious. Aaron chuckled and patted her head. Haha, don't be scared, Anne. No idea who your new professor is, but the book's definitely interesting. They're not dangerous. He entered the shop and asked the manager for 2 copies. The man's face instantly went pale. Harry quickly said, I already have 1. The manager visibly relaxed. He pulled on a pair of thick gloves, grabbed a battered club-like stick, and approached the cage. One of the books lunged and clamped onto the stick like a gaping mouth. He quickly cracked the cage open just enough to yank one out. The book kept chomping at the stick, and the manager wrestled it still and tied it up with a rope. Never again. I'm never reading these things again. Total nightmare. We once had 200 copies of the Invisible Book of Invisibility, thought that was bad enough, but this is chaos. They're expensive, and we never, ugh. Anyway, do you need any other books? He handed the bound copy to Anne. Aaron took it for her. Harry pulled out his list and read, I still need Unfogging the Future by Cassandra Vablatsky, Intermediate Transfiguration, and Standard Book of Spells, Grade 3. I need those too, Anne added, and asked for the Arithmancy and Ancient Runes books as well. While the manager went to fetch them, Anne eyed the bound monster book still squirming in Aaron's hand. Uncle Aaron, are you sure this thing's not dangerous? Harry looked curious too. Aaron saw Anne's doubtful face and laughed. Of course. I've never lied to you, have I? Look, just stroke the spine and it'll calm down. He handed her the now quiet book. Anne stroked it and the book loosened, letting her open it. It actually works. Harry gave Aaron an admiring look. He'd had a hard time taming his copy when Hagrid first sent it. The manager brought over the rest of their books. After paying, they stepped outside. At the door, Aaron asked, Potter, are you heading back to your aunt's place later? Anyone picking you up? Harry flushed and mumbled, No, I'm staying at the Leaky Cauldron right now. Oh, that's fine then, Aaron replied casually and didn't press further. Anne gave Aaron a curious look, he was acting strange. Then it clicked. Probably because Sirius Black had escaped Azkaban a couple of weeks ago. The Ministry was on edge about Harry. Harry seemed relieved that Aaron didn't dig any deeper, he had broken wizarding law, after all. Trying to change the subject, he asked Anne, So, have you finished all your shopping? Yep, all done. I'm heading straight home. All right. See you on the Hogwarts Express then. Actually, I won't be taking the train this year, Anne said cheerfully. Uncle Aaron's bringing me directly to Hogwarts via Floo powder. Dumbledore wrote the Ministry to approve it since there's something going on in the Forbidden Forest that needs attention. Uncle's handling it, and I'm tagging along." Harry looked both disappointed and a little jealous. "Wow, really? That's awesome. I've never traveled to school that way. I bet Hermione's going to be upset she won't see you on the train. And Fred and George too. Ron said they've been talking all summer about asking you stuff." Anne snickered to herself. Dodging a few hours of non-stop questions didn't sound so bad. September 1st, Hogwarts, Headmaster's office. Whoosh! Anne spun into existence inside the fireplace of Dumbledore's office. Moments later, Aaron appeared behind her, carrying her suitcase. Dumbledore rose from behind his desk and came to greet them. "Aaron, it's been a long time. Miss Reeve, how was your summer?" "It was wonderful, thank you, Headmaster," Anne replied brightly. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled as he glanced at the badge on her robes. "Oh? It's been quite some time since I've seen that crest. It seems the Roland family has produced another fine witch." Anne just smiled. Aaron took over the conversation. "Oh no, you flatter her. She's not nearly as exceptional as you say." Despite the modest words, his proud grin betrayed him. "Anne, go ahead to your dorm. The headmaster and I have some business to discuss. Someone will bring you your suitcase to your room shortly." "All right, Uncle Aaron." "Thank you, Headmaster." Anne stepped out and headed down the spiral staircase. It was her first time in the headmaster's office, and her first time arriving at school earlier than everyone else. She stopped by a window to take in the view. The office sat high in the castle, and from this angle she could see the lake stretching wide below. The sky had already darkened, the sun setting behind her, casting the lake in deep blue stillness. After a moment of enjoying the scenery, she made her way downstairs. With no one around, she decided to explore a few parts of the castle she hadn't seen before. Start of term feast. Slytherin table. Draco Malfoy was imitating Harry fainting on the train, reenacting the scene with dramatic flair while Goyle played a Dementor beside him. Fanny ignored them and whispered to Anne, "It was terrifying, Anne. You don't know how awful Azkaban is. My dad told me Sirius Black is the first person in its history to escape. He killed a wizard and 12 muggles right on the street. Do you think he'll come to Hogwarts?" "Maybe," Anne replied. "But the Ministry stationed Dementors around the entrances. It won't be easy for him to get in." "My dad says Dementors aren't exactly trustworthy either," Fanny whispered, "they used to work for you-know-who." "Your dad told you that?" Anne asked. Fanny looked shifty. I overheard it. And I also heard Dumbledore's really unhappy about the Ministry putting Dementors near the school. But why would he be against it? I mean, they're scary, sure, but if Sirius Black really does come to Hogwarts, they could stop him, right?" Anne thought to herself, so the Ministry hasn't told the public Sirius is after Harry. And Dumbledore probably still doesn't know he's an animagus either. She said vaguely, "What are Dementors supposed to do anyway?" "They guard Azkaban. And now? They're guarding all the school exits." Anne cut her off. "Fanny, shh. Dumbledore's about to speak." Fanny fell silent. "Welcome." Professor Dumbledore's voice rang out as candlelight made his beard shimmer. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. I have a few words before we begin, one of which is quite serious, and I'd rather say it before you're too full to pay attention." He cleared his throat. "As you now know, Dementors searched the Hogwarts Express. This year, we will be hosting several Dementors from Azkaban, sent here on Ministry business. They are stationed at every entrance to the school," Dumbledore continued, "and while they remain here, I must be clear, no one is to leave the grounds without permission. Dementors cannot be fooled, not by trickery, disguise, or even invisibility cloaks. They do not understand kindness or excuses. I warn each of you, do not give them a reason to harm you. I trust the prefects and our new head boy and girl will ensure no one comes into conflict with them." He paused, scanning the silent hall with solemn eyes. On a happier note, he added, "We welcome 2 new teachers this year. First, Professor Lupin, who has kindly agreed to fill the Defense Against the Dark Arts vacancy." Sparse, lukewarm applause followed. Professor Lupin sat among the more polished staff, looking rather shabby. "Our second appointment," Dumbledore went on after the clapping died down, "is for care of magical creatures. Professor Kettleben retired at the end of last year to spend more time with his remaining limbs. I'm pleased to announce that none other than Rubeus Hagrid will be taking over. In addition to being our keeper of keys and grounds, he is now your new teacher." The Gryffindor table erupted in applause. Harry leaned forward and saw Hagrid blushing furiously, staring at his giant hands, a smile hidden in his bushy beard. "Well, I think that covers everything important," said Dumbledore. "Let the feast begin. Hey, Anne, didn't you arrive with your uncle? Isn't he coming to the feast?" Fanny asked. Anne casually grabbed a slice of toast. "He's probably already in the Forbidden Forest. If he finds the creature he's after, he has to return to the Ministry right away." "What creature? How would I know?" If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 45, Divination Class. The next morning, when Fanny and Anne entered the Great Hall for breakfast, Malfoy was still reenacting yesterday's Dementor scene. A crowd of Slytherins had gathered around him, laughing loudly. Fanny rolled her eyes and ignored him, heading straight to her seat. Anne picked up a jar of jam and returned to her spot to spread it on her bread. A moment later, the Golden Trio entered the hall. Malfoy called out mockingly, "Hey, Potter! Potter! The Dementor's coming for you!" But the trio paid him no mind and went straight to the Gryffindor table. Anne didn't even notice their entrance, she was staring intently at her class schedule. A moment later, she groaned. "I have classes every morning and afternoon. That's awful." Fanny glanced at Anne's gem-packed schedule and pulled out her own. "Looks about the same. It's normal in 3rd year." "Oh, right, we only skipped 1 elective each. I didn't take Muggle studies, and you didn't take arithmancy," Anne muttered. Still, she looked miserable. "That just means we have 4 more subjects to write homework for every week." 3, Fanny corrected her. "I doubt Hagrid's Care of Magical Creatures class will have any homework. But that book is terrifying, I bought it over the summer and haven't dared open it. Look, we've got that class this afternoon. Hopefully it'll be interesting," Anne said. They climbed to the top of the North Tower and reached a landing, where most of the class was already gathered. But there was no door. "There's no classroom here," Fanny said, glancing around. Anne pointed up at the circular trapdoor in the ceiling and read the words engraved on it aloud, "Sybil Trelawney, Divination Instructor." Then she added, "Maybe we need a ladder." As if responding to her voice, the trapdoor suddenly creaked open, and a ladder slid down until it touched the floor in front of Anne. Everyone fell silent. "I'll go up first," Anne volunteered and climbed the ladder into one of the strangest rooms she had ever seen. It didn't feel like a classroom at all, more like a cross between an attic and a Victorian tea room. At least 20 small round tables were squeezed into the space. Each table was surrounded by squashy armchairs covered in Indian print fabric and plump cushions. The whole room was bathed in a dim reddish glow, the curtains were drawn, and deep red lampshades muffled the light. The air was stiflingly warm. A fire crackled in the hearth, with a copper kettle bubbling above it, releasing a heavy, sweet-smelling scent. The curved walls were lined with shelves cluttered with dusty feathers, stubby candle ends, battered tarot cards, dozens of crystal balls, and heaps of teacups. Students continued to climb up after Anne. The last to arrive were the Golden Trio, which made Fanny squeal in delight. She grabbed Anne and led her to a table next to theirs. Anne had wanted to sit farther away, but now they were right in front of Professor Trelawney. She shot Fanny a helpless look. Fanny pretended not to notice. "Welcome to divination," said a soft, misty voice. Professor Trelawney stepped into the firelight. She was exceptionally thin, with enormous glasses that magnified her eyes to the size of saucers. She wore a gauzy, shimmering shawl over her shoulders and was adorned with necklaces, bangles, and rings on every finger. "Sit, my dears, sit," she said, and everyone clumsily settled into the chairs or cushions. Harry, Ron, and Hermione took one table, Fanny and Anne sat at the next. "I am Professor Trelawney," she continued, sitting herself in a winged armchair by the fire. "You likely haven't seen me before. The hustle and bustle of school life clouds my inner eye." No one responded to that odd opening. "You have chosen to study divination," she said as she adjusted her shawl. "It is the most difficult of all magical arts. I must warn you now, if you do not possess the sight, there is little I can teach you. Books can only take you so far." At this, Harry, Ron, and Fanny all glanced at Hermione. Anne's attention, meanwhile, wandered to the room's cluttered decor. Hermione looked genuinely affronted that a class would be so dismissive of books. Many witches and wizards, though gifted in jinxes, potions, and sudden vanishing, are quite hopeless when it comes to seeing the future, Professor Trelawney went on. "The gift is rare. You, boy," she suddenly pointed to Neville, who jumped. "How is your grandmother?" I think she's fine," Neville stammered. "If I were you, I wouldn't be so sure, dear," Trelawney replied, her emerald earrings glinting in the firelight. Neville looked like he might faint. "This term, we will begin with tea leaf reading," she announced. "Next term, palmistry. And come summer, we will study crystal gazing, provided we complete omens and fire. I must also warn you, in February, a nasty bout of flu will cancel classes. I will lose my voice. And before Easter, one among us will leave forever." A nervous silence filled the room. Professor Trelawney, unfazed, turned to Lavender Brown and asked, "Would you kindly fetch the largest teapot, dear?" Lavender leapt up, relieved to have a task, and retrieved a massive teapot from the shelf, placing it before the professor. "Thank you, dear. By the way, what you fear most will happen on Friday, October 16th. Lavender trembled. "Now, divide into pairs," Trelawney instructed. "Take a teacup from the shelf and bring it to me. I will fill it with tea. Drink it down until only the leaves remain. Swirl the dregs 3 times with your left hand, then turn the cup upside down on the saucer. When the last drop has drained away, pass the cup to your partner for interpretation. You may consult Unfogging the Future, pages 5 and 6. I will walk among you to assist. Oh, and dear," she added to Neville, pulling him up by the arm, "after you break your first cup, please use one of the blue patterned ones, I'm rather fond of the pink ones." Sure enough, as Neville approached the shelves, the sound of breaking china rang out. Trelawney hurried over with a dustpan and broom. "Blue ones, dear, thank you." Once Anne and Fanny had their cups filled, they returned to their table. Anne didn't touch her scalding tea right away, instead, she flipped through the book. Divination in the magical world is just as unreliable as astrology back home, she thought. When her tea cooled, Anne followed the instructions, swirled the leaves, and flipped the cup. Fanny, who had already finished her tea, handed over her cup. Anne idly turned it in her hands, skimming the book, while Fanny earnestly studied the patterns. I see a circle. An oval? Is that a moon or a sun?" Fanny rotated the cup. "Probably the sun. The sun means great happiness. Wait, no, it could be the moon. The moon means constant change. Anne couldn't help but laugh. What are you laughing at? Fanny asked, puzzled. Have you heard the saying, the only constant in life is change? Hermione, nearby, let out a laugh too, clearly having overheard and agreed. I think I've heard that. A philosopher said it, right? Fanny asked. At that, Harry burst into laughter, and Ron started making vague jokes that had Harry cracking up. Trelawney, hearing the laughter, seemed to take offense. She spun around and snatched Ron's cup. Peering into it, she began turning it slowly. A falcon, dear boy, you have an enemy. Well, everyone knows that, Hermione muttered loudly. Trelawney glared at her. I mean, Hermione added, everyone knows Harry and you know who. The others stared at her, shocked and slightly impressed. Hermione had never spoken to a teacher that way before. Trelawney ignored her. She continued to rotate the cup. A club, danger is approaching, a skull, a threat to your life, dear boy. Then she gasped dramatically and collapsed into an armchair, clutching her chest. Oh, my poor, dear child, no, it's better not to say, it's too dreadful, don't ask me. What is it, Professor? Dean Thomas asked. Everyone had gathered around Harry and Ron's table, leaning in to see. You are in grave danger, she whispered. A grim omen. The Grim, a large, spectral dog that haunts graveyards. The worst omen of death. Everyone stared at Harry. Except for Hermione and Anne. Anne was still flipping through the book. Hermione, however, marched behind Trelawney's chair. That doesn't look like a Grim to me, she said flatly. Trelawney looked at her coldly. I'm sorry, dear, but your aura is very faint. You lack the sensitivity to resonate with the future. I believe that concludes our lesson, Trelawney said dreamily. Please tidy up. Everyone silently returned their cups, closed their books, and packed their bags. As they descended the ladder, people quickened their pace when passing Harry, not saying a word. I don't think she's right, Hermione said, breaking the silence. But the Grim is real. Ron argued. My uncle Bilius saw one, and died 24 hours later. Behind them, Anne and Fanny walked quietly. Fanny tugged on Anne's sleeve and whispered, Anne, do you think Harry saw the Grim? The trio all turned to Anne, clearly placing weight on her answer. Don't worry, Harry. I'm sure you'll live through the next 24 hours, probably for a long time after that. Harry let out a sigh of relief. Hermione looked vindicated. Ron, however, grumbled, but grim omens do exist in our world. I never said they didn't, Anne replied. I just said Harry probably wasn't one. And honestly, real seers are extremely rare. Divination is mostly guesswork. Ron still looked unconvinced. Anne suddenly remembered a fun story about a fake prophecy from her past life. She grinned. Speaking of predictions, let's play a game. What game? The three asked in unison, except Hermione, who frowned. We've got Transfiguration in 10 minutes, she reminded them. This won't make you late, Anne promised, pulling a piece of parchment and a quill from her bag. Turn around, no peeking. When they did, she quickly scribbled something on the parchment and cast an invisibility charm. Then she tore it into 4 equal pieces. Okay, you can turn back around. She handed each of them a folded scrap. I've written a prophecy on these. Don't open it yet. You must wait until a rainy day. If you peek early or cheat, the magic will fail. They nodded, taking the parchment. This is the game? Fanny asked, puzzled. Doesn't seem like much. It's a prophecy game. You'll see. Just follow the rules, okay? Anne said seriously, though she was suppressing a laugh. Harry and Ron tucked theirs into their books solemnly. Hermione hesitated but eventually accepted hers. Now hurry to Transfiguration. You don't want Professor McGonagall mad. The three of them ran off. Once they were gone, Anne finally burst out laughing. Fanny eyed her suspiciously, pulling out her wand. What did you write on these? Anne blocked her with a grin. Come on, Fanny. You agreed to the rules. September's weather is unpredictable, just wait. You'll see. A/N, I actually quite like Professor Sybil Trelawney, haha. Even though the plot didn't require it, I just had to give her more scenes. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 46, Care of Magical Creatures Class. After lunch, Fanny and Anne left the castle, crossing the soft grass in front to head toward Hagrid's hut for their first Care of Magical Creatures lesson. When they arrived, they found that the class was held together with Gryffindor. Wow, Anne, we're going to be in the same classes as Ron, Harry, and Hermione almost all day on Mondays. Fanny said happily. Fanny, that might not be a good thing. Anne replied, eyeing Draco Malfoy, Goyle, Crabbe, and Pansy Parkinson giggling together beside the hut. Well, they'll definitely get into another argument with Harry, Fanny said with a tone of resignation. Once all the students had arrived, Hagrid appeared, wearing his moleskin coat and dragging his hound Fang along. He shouted, "Come in, hurry up now. Got a real treat for ya today. Gonna be a great lesson. Everyone here? Right, follow me." He led them along the edge of the forest, and after 5 minutes, they arrived outside what looked like a paddock. But there was nothing inside. "Gather round the fence," Hagrid called. "That's it, where ya can all see. Now, the first thing I want ya to do is open your books." "How do we open them?" drawled Draco Malfoy lazily. "Hey!" Hagrid said. "How do we open our books?" Malfoy repeated. He pulled out his monster book of monsters, which he had tied up with a cord. Realizing Malfoy was trying to sabotage Hagrid's first lesson, Harry spoke up loudly, "You just stroke the spine gently, and it'll calm down." As he spoke, he ran his hand down the book's spine, and it opened at once. Hagrid gave Harry a grateful look, while Malfoy glared at him venomously. Harry ignored him. Once everyone had managed to open their books, Hagrid beamed. "Turn to page 95, that's the bit on hippogriffs. I'll be right back." He disappeared into the forest. A moment later, screams broke out among the students. Anne looked up toward the far side of the paddock, where 12 strange creatures were approaching quickly. They had the bodies, hind legs, and tails of horses, but their front legs, wings, and heads were those of eagles. Their beaks were sharp and steel-colored, and their bright orange eyes gleamed. The claws on their front legs looked at least half a foot long, enough to be deadly. Each creature wore a feathery collar around its neck with a long chain attached. Hagrid held all the chains bunched up in one enormous hand, jogging after them as they entered the paddock. "Back over there," he bellowed, swinging the chains and urging the creatures toward the fence where the students stood. As he secured them to the posts, most of the class took several steps back. "Hippogriffs!" Hagrid roared happily. "Aren't they beautiful?" "So," he said, rubbing his hands together and smiling at the group, "if ya want to step forward." But no one moved. Anne thought to herself, we barely looked at the textbook and now we're supposed to approach the real thing? Isn't that too fast? "Well," Hagrid continued, undeterred, "the first thing ya need to know about hippogriffs is they're proud creatures, easily offended. Never insult a hippogriff. That might just be the last thing ya ever do. Always wait for the hippogriff to make the first move. That's polite, see? Ya walk toward it, ya bow, and then ya wait. If it bows back, ya can approach and touch it. If it doesn't, back away. Fast. Those claws don't mess around." Having explained this, Hagrid asked brightly, right then. Who wants to go first? The creatures tossed their heads and unfurled their powerful wings. They clearly weren't happy about being restrained. Anne instinctively stepped back, and saw that she wasn't alone. Almost the entire class did the same, even Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked hesitant. No one? Hagrid asked, a pleading look in his eyes. I'll do it, said Harry. Anne heard someone take a sharp breath. Nearby, Lavender and Parvati whispered, "Oh no, Harry, remember your tea leaves." Harry ignored them and climbed over the fence. Fanny clutched Anne's arm tightly, watching Harry anxiously. "Well done, Harry," Hagrid called. "Right, let's see how ya get along with Buckbeak here." He untied one of the chains and led Buckbeak away from the others, removing the collar from its thick neck. The rest of the class held its breath. Malfoy narrowed his eyes with a smirk. "Easy, now, Harry," Hagrid said quietly. "Look it in the eyes, try not to blink, if ya blink too much, it won't trust yet." Harry's eyes watered, but he didn't blink. Buckbeak had turned its big, sharp head to glare at him with one fierce orange eye. "That's it," Hagrid murmured. "Now, bow." Harry gave a small bow and stood upright. The creature didn't move, still glaring. "Ah," said Hagrid, worry creeping into his voice. "Okay, back off now, Harry, nice and slow." But then Buckbeak suddenly bent its scaly front knees and sank down into a bow. "Brilliant, Harry!" Hagrid shouted, overjoyed. "Go on, give it a pat. On the beak, just like that." Not wanting to miss the chance, Harry cautiously walked forward and patted its beak several times. Buckbeak closed its eyes lazily, it seemed to enjoy the attention. Most students applauded, except Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, who looked disappointed. "Well done, Harry," Hagrid said. "Think it might even let ye ride it." Harry placed one foot on Buckbeak's wing and climbed onto its back. Buckbeak stood up. "Off ye go!" Hagrid shouted, slapping the creature's hindquarters. Without warning, Buckbeak's 12-foot wingspan unfurled, and it launched into the air. Harry grabbed its neck just in time. They soared once around the paddock before gliding back to the ground. "Great job, Harry!" Hagrid cheered, while the others, except Malfoy and his gang, burst into applause. "Right then, who's next?" Encouraged by Harry's success, Fanny happily tugged Anne forward. Along with most of the class, they carefully stepped over the fence. Hagrid unchained the creatures one at a time. Fanny and Anne were assigned a chestnut-colored hippogriff. Anne bowed and received a bow in return. Fanny followed suit and succeeded too. Anne stepped up to the creature, nearly as tall as a one-story building, and gently patted its beak. It nuzzled her hand affectionately. Fanny stroked its feathers and turned to Anne with a wide smile. "Anne, it's so soft." Anne nodded, smiling back. But not everyone treated the creatures with respect. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle chose Buckbeak. The creature bowed politely, and Malfoy approached with a look of disdain. "This is easy," Malfoy sneered loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "If Potter can do it, it must be a piece of cake. Bet you're not dangerous at all, are you, you ugly brute?" Fanny gasped. Anne muttered, "Idiot." Right after Malfoy spoke, he screamed. Buckbeak had slashed his arm with its steel-grey claws. Hagrid rushed over and wrestled Buckbeak back into its collar, preventing it from lunging again. Malfoy lay curled up on the grass, blood staining his robes. "I'm dying!" Malfoy wailed. "It's killed me." "You're not dying," Hagrid said, pale-faced. "Someone help me, we've got to get him out of here." Hermione ran to open the gate. Hagrid lifted Malfoy easily and sprinted toward the castle. As they passed, students saw the long, deep gash on Malfoy's arm and the trail of blood he left on the grass. The entire class followed behind. The two houses were on the verge of arguing. They should expel it right away, sobbed Pansy Parkinson. It's Malfoy's fault. Dean Thomas snapped. Crabbe and Goyle flexed threateningly. Anne remained silent at the back. Fanny and a couple of Slytherin girls were consoling Pansy. They climbed the stone steps into the deserted entrance hall. I need to see if he's okay, Pansy cried, chasing after Hagrid and Malfoy up the marble stairs. Slytherin students kept ranting about Hagrid as they returned to their common room. Anne also intended to head to the dorm, but after a few steps, Fanny tugged her sleeve. She pointed toward the Gryffindor students. The trio was frantically motioning at them. Anne was dragged into a side hall just off the entrance hall. You don't think he'll be seriously hurt, do you? Hermione asked nervously. He'll be fine. Madame Pomfrey can fix a cut in a second, Harry said. But there was so much blood. That cut was huge. Remember how Anne's arm took a whole week to heal last term? Fanny said, clearly upset. Anne gave Fanny a look that said, why drag me into this again? Well, it's different, Ron said. Malfoy brought it on himself with that comment about Buckbeak. Fanny glared at Ron. Malfoy might be horrible, but he was hurt. He said something nasty, sure, but he didn't deserve that. If Hagrid hadn't held Buckbeak back, it would have clawed him again. Oh come on, just a little horrible. He's a lot horrible. Ron muttered. Fanny glared again. Hagrid just wanted his first class to go well, Harry said. He never meant for this to happen. But it did happen. Do you think Hagrid will get fired? Hermione asked. Ron answered quickly, Malfoy'll definitely tell his dad. He'll blow this up for sure. The four fell silent and looked toward Anne, who still hadn't said anything. Why are you all looking at me? Anne said helplessly. How would I know if Hagrid's getting fired? Hermione and Fanny didn't seem convinced. Fanny tugged Anne's sleeve. Come on, Anne, don't keep it to yourself. Sigh, Anne thought. Looks like I have to say something. Hagrid rushed things. He had us read for just a few minutes before bringing out hippogriffs. The others tensed, worried she was about to say he would be fired. But no, he won't be fired. Dumbledore wouldn't let Hagrid go after just one lesson. Besides, Malfoy was partly at fault. Everyone sighed in relief. But, Anne continued, even if Hagrid is safe, someone's going to take the blame. The Malfoy family won't let this go. Wait, Anne. You mean Buckbeak? Hermione asked. Anne nodded. You should tell Hagrid to prepare himself. Oh, and don't forget what Dumbledore said at the welcoming feast. It might come in handy. As Anne and Fanny walked away, Ron turned to Harry. She's talking about not leaving the school without permission, isn't she? Hermione nodded. That's exactly what Anne meant. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 47, The Boggart. On Thursday afternoon, they had their first defense against the dark arts class with Professor Lupin. During lunch at the Slytherin table, Malfoy sat with his injured arm in a sling, wrapped in bandages, recounting to the other Slytherins from different years how a terrifying beast had clawed his arm during care of magical creatures class. He makes it sound like he's some kind of hero who fought off an evil monster. Fanny muttered to Anne. Anne gave Malfoy a sidelong glance, stabbed a slice of cured ham with her fork, and said, I thought you'd be used to it by now. Malfoy always finds a way to make himself look important. Well, you're right, Anne, but that doesn't make it any less annoying. Fanny rolled her eyes and changed the subject. Anne, what do you think our defense against the dark arts class will be like this afternoon? Honestly, the last two professors we had were awful. Oh? You don't like Lockhart anymore? Anne teased with a slight smile. Fanny shot her a reproachful look. I didn't know back then he was all talk and no talent. Don't change the subject, seriously, Anne, what do you think of the new professor? Anne thought back to the previous timeline and the various defense professors. If she remembered correctly, Professor Lupin was widely considered one of the best, loved by fans and especially by the main trio. After swallowing her food, Anne said evenly, maybe Professor Lupin will turn out to be a decent teacher. You think so? Fanny sounded surprised. She looked over at the staff table, where Professor Lupin sat alone in a corner, eating quietly. His robes were patched and worn, and he looked a bit tired and worn down. Anne, you know I hate that nonsense Malfoy spouts about Lupin, but honestly, our new defense professor looks a little. Fanny hesitated, then settled on a word, frail. Anne nearly choked on her food. Frail? Lupin? He could transform into a werewolf. Snape didn't even dare face him head-on in that form. She took a sip of fruit juice and said meaningfully, we'll find out this afternoon, won't we? When they arrived at the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, Professor Lupin was nowhere to be seen. Only a few Slytherins and Gryffindors were in the room, seated on opposite sides with an empty gap between them, like a battlefield with clearly drawn lines. Oh great, another class with Gryffindor. Fanny muttered, much less enthusiastic than she'd been before care of magical creatures. She and Anne took seats on the Slytherin side. A little later, Goyle, Blaise, and Pansy arrived, but Malfoy was missing. Once the three sat down, Fanny turned to ask Pansy, who was sitting in the back, why Malfoy wasn't there. Pansy replied worriedly, he said his arm hurt after lunch and went to the hospital wing. Fanny made a face and turned away. She should have known, Malfoy would milk the injury for all it was worth. Just before class began, the Gryffindor trio rushed in. They froze briefly upon seeing the Slytherins, then relaxed slightly when they realized Malfoy wasn't there. The bell rang. Moments later, Professor Lupin entered carrying a battered suitcase. He set it on the desk and turned to the class. Good afternoon. Please put your books away, today will be a practical lesson. You'll only need your wands. The class obeyed, a few students exchanging curious looks. They had never had a practical defense class before, unless you count that infamous one with Lockhart, when he released a cage full of Cornish pixies. Now then, Lupin continued once everyone was ready, please follow me. Fanny gave Anne a puzzled glance, silently asking where they were going. Anne returned a calm look as if to say, wait and see. At the same time, a flicker of recognition sparked in Anne's mind. She remembered something about this lesson. Lupin had released something. But her memories were fuzzy, after all, she'd watched the Harry Potter films back in high school. The films had changed quite a few details from the books. Still, she figured it couldn't be anything too dangerous, so she didn't dwell on it. Lupin led them down an empty corridor, then turned a corner. There, they encountered Peeves the poltergeist, who was hanging upside down in midair, stuffing chewing gum into a keyhole. Only when Lupin was about 2 feet away did Peeves look up, and then he immediately began to sing, wiggling his feet. Loony, Lupa Lupin. Loony, Lupa Lupin. Everyone turned quickly to see how their professor would respond. To their surprise, Lupin kept smiling. He politely asked Peeves to move aside, but Peeves refused. Sighing, Lupin pulled out his wand. This is a handy little charm, he said to the class. Watch closely. He raised his wand to shoulder height. Wadawasai, he cried, pointing at Peeves. The wad of gum shot out of the keyhole like a bullet, and lodged straight up Peeves' left nostril. The poltergeist yelped and shot off down the corridor, cursing as he went. The students burst out laughing. It wasn't often anyone got the better of Peeves. As they looked at their raggedly dressed professor, their respect visibly grew. Please, come in, Lupin said, opening a door and stepping aside. The staff room was a long room filled with mismatched chairs. At the far end stood a tall, old wardrobe. "This way," Lupin said, leading the class toward it. As he approached, the wardrobe began to shake and bang against the wall. "Don't worry," Lupin said calmly as some students jumped back in fright. "There's a boggart inside." "Boggarts like dark, enclosed spaces," he explained. "Cupboards, under beds, under sinks. I once found one in a grandfather clock. This one arrived yesterday afternoon. I asked the headmaster if we could leave it undisturbed so my third years could get some practice. So, our first question, what is a boggart?" Hermione raised her hand. "It's a shapeshifter, it takes the form of whatever frightens us most." "Well said," Lupin nodded, and Hermione beamed with pride. "So right now, the boggart is sitting in the dark inside that cupboard, formless. It hasn't yet seen what frightens any of you. No one knows what a boggart looks like when it's alone. But once I let it out, it'll immediately try to take on the form of whatever scares each of you most. The spell to repel a boggart is simple, but it requires focus. The true weapon against a boggart is laughter. You must force it into a shape that's ridiculous to you. Let's practice the incantation first. Say it with me, ridiculous. Ridiculous, the class chorused. Excellent, Lupin smiled. But saying the word isn't enough. Neville, we'll start with you. If Neville succeeds, the boggart will probably turn to the rest of you one by one, Lupin explained. Now take out your wands, and think about what you fear most, and how to make it look silly. The room fell into murmurs as students quietly spoke their fears and thoughts. When Neville transformed Snape into a vision in a frilly dress and vulture hat, the Gryffindors burst out laughing. Some Slytherins stifled their laughter but dared not show it. Anne didn't laugh at all. Her posture stiffened. Turning fear into a visual? That hit far too close to home. She stared at the boggart in the center, lips pressed into a tight line. Fanny noticed Anne's change in demeanor. She gave her a puzzled look, just as Lupin began calling up the next students to face the boggart. Anne took a step back, then another. She was already standing near the edge of the group, and now she found herself entirely outside the circle. Fanny stepped back with her, worried. She'd never seen Anne this tense before. Her friend wasn't just nervous, there was something else in her eyes. "Anne, what's wrong?" Fanny finally asked. Anne's knuckles were white as she gripped her wand. She stared at the stone wall instead of the boggart, silently reminding herself she was far enough away, that incident was long over. Fanny didn't press further, but her eyes stayed locked on Anne in concern. Suddenly, there was a cry from the circle, someone had turned the boggart into a red balloon. It floated toward Anne. Pop! The balloon burst. In its place appeared a grim grey door with frosted glass. Behind the glass were two blurry silhouettes, a man and a woman, talking. The image lasted only a second before twisting and warping violently. A massive shadow loomed, growing taller until it nearly touched the ceiling. It solidified into a skeletal figure cloaked in black, gripping a gleaming scythe that glinted with cold light. Gasps filled the room. Students recoiled, their faces pale with terror. Anne stood frozen the moment the grey door appeared. Her limbs locked, her eyes wide with fear. With a strangled breath, she staggered backward, then turned and fled the room. A/N, we've touched on Anne's past life, this boggart revealed her deepest fear. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 48, Aftermath. As soon as Anne stepped outside, she slumped against the cold stone wall, gasping for breath. She was trying desperately to suppress the rising panic and the two whispering voices echoing in her mind. She didn't want to hear them, not again, so she screamed back at them in her head, using her own voice to drown them out. "It's over. It's over. It's all over, don't think about it, don't think about it." Anne, it's in the past. Fanny and Hermione had followed Anne out almost the moment she bolted from the room. When they caught up to her, they exchanged a glance. Worry clouded both their faces. This was the first time they had ever seen Anne like this. Her head was down, her chest heaving with every breath, one hand still tightly clutching her wand. "Anne!" Fanny called gently. Anne didn't respond. Fanny cautiously took a step toward her, but Anne instantly flinched and darted away like a startled kitten, putting more distance between them. Fanny looked helplessly at Hermione, who shook her head in quiet warning. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then the door to the staff room opened and students began pouring out. Fanny and Hermione quickly formed a small barrier around Anne to keep others from getting too close. But no one said a word. The students walked past on quiet footsteps, leaving swiftly. The last ones out were Harry, Ron, and Professor Lupin. Lupin's expression was full of guilt. He glanced at Fanny and Hermione, silently asking them to step aside. They did. He cautiously took a step toward Anne. But she immediately backed away into the corner of the corridor, pressing herself into it. Lupin didn't dare approach further. No one spoke. Gradually, Anne's breathing began to calm. After several more seconds pressed into the wall, a hoarse voice emerged from deep in her throat. "I'm fine." Fanny and Hermione both frowned. Anne clearly looked nothing like she was fine. Lupin seemed to share their opinion. "Anne, if you don't mind, would you come to my office with me? I think a cup of hot cocoa might help," Lupin said gently, his voice calm and slow. "All right." Anne's voice was rasped and low. She straightened, no longer leaning on the wall, and tucked her wand away into her robe. But she kept her eyes down, not meeting anyone's gaze. She followed Lupin with Hermione and Fanny close behind. Harry and Ron exchanged a glance, then silently followed too. Lupin's office wasn't far from the staff room. It was a small space, but a fire had already been lit inside, filling the room with a cozy warmth. Anne entered first. Hermione and Fanny didn't hesitate to follow. Harry and Ron lingered at the doorway, then chose to wait outside. "Sit down, my office may be small, but there's still room for guests," Lupin said warmly. Anne took the nearest armchair and sat. Hermione and Fanny quickly took the two seats behind her. As Lupin walked toward the cabinet of teacups, Anne suddenly spoke. Her voice was no longer hoarse, but cold and distant. "I'm sorry, Professor Lupin. I didn't mean to ruin your first class." "Oh no, no, I should be the one apologizing," Lupin said quickly, guilt in his voice. He raised his wand, and 4 teacups floated into the air, beginning to serve themselves. A steaming cup of hot cocoa landed on the side table next to Anne. She glanced at it but didn't reach for it. "Hot cocoa might," Lupin began. But before he could finish, Anne picked up the cup. She lifted it slowly to eye level, stared at her reflection on the surface for a moment, then set it back down. "Professor Lupin, you don't need to feel guilty. Teaching us how to defend against a boggart was a useful and relatively safe lesson. I'm sorry for how I acted in your class, but it's a personal matter. I'm fine now. If you're planning to ask questions, I believe I have the right to remain silent. And beyond that, I don't think there's any reason for me to stay here. Thank you for the cocoa, it looks lovely." She said it all in one smooth, even breath. Then she looked up at Lupin with cool, emotionless eyes. "May I go now?" Lupin, still holding his cup, was stunned for a moment. After a pause, he asked gently, "Anne, are you sure you're all right?" Anne stood. She nodded stiffly. "Absolutely certain, Professor. But thank you for your concern." And with that, she turned and walked straight out the door. Fanny and Hermione stood quickly. They glanced at Lupin, who gave them a wry smile. "It seems Anne doesn't trust me," he said softly. Maybe you two can offer her more comfort. They hurried after her. Outside, Harry and Ron were whispering to each other. They jumped when they saw Anne come out so soon. "Hey, Anne, are you okay?" Ron asked. Hermione and Fanny came out with her just in time to hear the question. "I'm fine," Anne replied flatly. Both Ron and Harry looked visibly relieved. "What's the homework, from Professor Lupin?" Anne asked. "Oh, he told us to read the chapter on boggarts and write a summary by Monday," Ron said. "Thanks, Ron," Anne replied. Ron's mouth dropped open. He turned to Harry in surprise. "Did you hear that? Anne just thanked me. Has she ever thanked me before?" Harry shook his head. Anne, having gotten her answer, walked past the two of them toward the Great Hall. Fanny leaned in and whispered to Hermione, "Hermione, she says she's fine, but I don't think she is." Hermione nodded, frowning. "I think so too. Should we ask her?" Hermione nodded again. They quickened their pace and caught up with Anne, stepping in front of her. Anne looked up, her gaze calm and unreadable. Hermione met her eyes, her voice filled with concern. "Anne, will you please tell us what happened? Why were you so afraid of a door?" Fanny added nervously, "And what was that thing that appeared after? Anne, have you ever seen something that terrifying before?" Hermione turned to Fanny to explain, "That last thing was Thanatos, the Greek god of death. He's said to wear a black cloak and carry a huge scythe." At the word door, Anne's hand, hidden in her robe pocket, gave a small, involuntary tremble. She gripped a galleon tightly in her fist. She stepped back slightly, turned her face toward a corridor window, and stared out at the sky. Her voice was quiet, tinged with a faint sadness. "It's personal. It has nothing to do with either of you." "But," Fanny started to protest. "Please," Anne said, her voice now carrying a trace of pleading. "Don't ask any more." Hermione suddenly remembered the story Anne had once told her in Paris, a secret she hadn't fully understood at the time. She looked at Anne's tense profile and said softly, "Okay, Anne. We won't ask." Anne straightened, eyes lowered, and walked on in silence. Hermione and Fanny walked beside her, while Harry and Ron followed a bit behind. When Anne reached the entrance to the Great Hall, every eye at the Gryffindor and Slytherin tables turned toward her. Though Professor Lupin had instructed the students to remain silent, many of them couldn't resist whispering about the terrifying shadow they'd seen emerge from Anne's boggart. The 4 students walking behind her looked irritated, clearly ready to shut them up, but Anne stopped at the entrance and said quietly, "It's fine. They have the right to talk. Go have your meals." The 4 of them exchanged glances, and Anne headed straight for the Slytherin table. "I think we should listen to her," Harry said. Anne ignored the stares from her housemates and sat in her usual seat. She picked up a plate of pan-seared lamb chops and began quietly cutting the meat into small bites, eating with silent precision. Fanny sat down beside her, saying nothing. Instead, she busied herself bringing over all of Anne's favorite dishes and placing them around her. No one at the Slytherin table stopped her. Not even Malfoy. He'd already heard Pansy describe Anne's boggart scene in dramatic detail. He might be arrogant, but he wasn't stupid. This wasn't the time to provoke Anne. Especially not after being bested by her twice. And since it was Fanny handling the food, he had even less reason to interfere. And so, for the first time in the history of Slytherin House, a strange scene unfolded. An array of delicious food formed a neat semicircle in front of Anne's seat, with her at the center. Soon after, Hermione, Harry, and Ron arrived from the Gryffindor table, each carrying food that wasn't available at the Slytherin side. Hermione smiled gently. "Anne, this is Yorkshire pudding, it's really good." Anne hadn't noticed when Fanny began piling food around her. She only realized something was off when she looked up after a few bites of lamb and saw the growing selection of dishes. Then came the Gryffindor trio, contributing even more. She let out a quiet laugh, half amused, half exasperated. Well, this is certainly a unique way to comfort someone. Once the three finished placing their offerings, Anne stood up, put down her knife and fork, and gave them a small smile. Thank you. I do love food, but there's no way I could finish all this even in 2 days. She paused, then added, by the way, you three should start preparing for potions tomorrow. I'm pretty sure Professor Snape already knows about Neville's boggart. Fanny gasped. Oh no. You're right, he's definitely going to give you a hard time. Harry and Ron shivered. They glanced nervously toward the staff table. Snape wasn't there. Right, Hermione, Ron said quickly. You'll help us tonight, won't you? Fine, Hermione replied. But her eyes were still on Anne. Anne gave her a small nod, and only then did Hermione follow Harry and Ron back to the Gryffindor table. If you're enjoying the journey so far and want to read ahead, you can check out 25+ advanced chapters on Patreon, patreon.com/crimson_lore. Chapter 49, Nightmare. Anne stared groggily at the white ceiling. Where was this? She propped herself up, the world around her a blur. The dim lighting in the room revealed a hazy whiteness, white walls, white bed sheets. Unsteadily, she slid off the bed, gripping the iron bed frame for support so she wouldn't fall. Glancing around, she noticed a single exit, a white-painted wooden door, with a small pane of clear glass inlaid at the top. Behind it, 2 shadowy figures stood, their voices faint but oddly familiar. She frowned. That voice, it sounded so familiar. Was it someone she knew? Dragging her weakened legs, Anne leaned against the tiled wall and inched slowly toward the door. What were they saying? As she drew closer, the words became clearer, a man's voice and a woman's voice tinged with sobs. How can you be so heartless? Anne, she. The woman choked, her voice breaking. The man didn't raise his voice, but there was a sharp edge of irritation in his tone. Do you think I want to give up on Anne? But how much have we already poured into this? How long are we supposed to keep going? But the woman's cries grew louder. Crying, that's all you do. We don't just have Anne, we have Leo too. Are we supposed to throw our entire savings into a bottomless pit? We still have the apartment, maybe we could sell. No. The man's voice grew harsh, biting. That apartment's for Leo, for when he goes to university. Do you know how much real estate prices are rising? Once it's sold, it's gone. Through the frosted glass, Anne saw one shadow lift an arm and strike the other twice. How can you say something like that? The woman shouted, her voice furious. The other figure didn't retaliate. He let out a long sigh and said, exhausted. Look, Anne's illness isn't going to get better. I'm just being honest. But Jing, he still has his whole life ahead of him. Are we really going to waste everything on Anne? Think about Jing. He's been calling for his mom for weeks. One of the figures raised a hand, as if covering their mouth. The woman's sobs shifted into muffled whimpers. The doctor said the surgery in 2 days has a low success rate. I'll try to scrape together what we need and pay tomorrow. If Anne doesn't make it, then, let's just consider it our final. The shadow with the hand over its mouth turned and ran off without saying another word. Ha! The man sighed, seemingly lighting a cigarette. A few blurred smoke trails floated above his silhouette. Then he turned toward the door. His voice was quiet, heavy. Anne, don't blame us. These last few months have been hell. We have to think about the future too. If you want to blame someone, then blame your bad luck. With that, he turned and walked away. Anne slumped against the cold wall beside the door. It felt like every organ in her body had lost all warmth. Were they talking about her? No. No, that couldn't be, right? She laughed hollowly. No, of course not. Her dad used to carry her on his shoulders when she was little, pretending to be a bull. That winter when she fell into the freezing river chasing fish, he wrapped her in his coat and sweater, sprinting home through the snow. When she turned 8, he spent a month's wages on a toy she wanted, smiling as he said, "Anne, if you asked for the moon, I'd pluck it down just for you." She remembered winning the citywide piano competition in middle school, and her parents' proud words, "Anne, we'll always be proud of you." So who were those people? Who was that other shadow? Why didn't she fight back? That couldn't be her mom. Her mom had always adored her. When she broke the neighbor's prized pickle jar during a roughhousing match, she didn't scold her, just hugged her tight while Anne wailed from her scraped knee. And when Anne lost patience during piano practice, her mom would coax her with treats. "Anne, just one more song and you can have this snack, it's delicious." So who was that outside the door? Anne pressed a trembling hand over her mouth and slowly slid down the wall. Sob, sob. "I'm scared. I'm so scared. Mom. Dad. I'm really scared." Suddenly, the scene shifted. A blinding white light pierced through even her shut eyes. When she opened them, a shadowless surgical lamp was glaring directly at her. The brightness stung. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She lay on a cold metal operating table. She tried to sit up, but her limbs wouldn't move. She could only lift her head slightly. Her blurry vision caught the outline of a dark figure slowly approaching. Closer, and closer. A floating black robe, and a large scythe. No, 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 no. Panic spread like wildfire. Anne struggled desperately, but her body felt paralyzed. The figure drew closer, a pale skull emerging beneath the robe. Terror consumed every inch of her. She tried to scream. "Enough! Go away! Don't come near me, stay away!" The black-robed figure responded. Its skeletal jaw began to move. A sharp, grating voice like nails on a chalkboard came from beneath the hood. "SSSSHHH, don't struggle, no one wants you alive, why not just die?" Anne shook her head violently, trying to drown out the voice with her own screams, but each syllable echoed crisply in her ears, like they were wired straight into her mind. Fear, despair, suffering, such delicious emotions. With every word, Anne trembled harder. But her body still wouldn't obey her. She forced her head up and slammed it against the operating table, shrieking with every ounce of strength she had. "Go away! Leave me alone! Don't come near me, don't say another word!" The black figure was only a step away now. Its voice turned jagged, like a chair leg screeching across tile. "Why live, when no one wants you alive?" The scythe lifted, and swung down. In the Slytherin dormitory, Anne shot up in bed, soaked in sweat and gasping for breath. Tears streamed down her face. Despite the blazing fire in the common room hearth, she felt ice cold. Disoriented, surrounded by darkness behind the bed curtains, the scenes from her nightmare played vividly in her mind. That voice, it still echoed. Her trembling